o'clock, I call this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we are not allowing for in-person public participation, interested community members were encouraged to submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through the GoToMeeting platform and expressed interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting. We will read those questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So, welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. I'm sure that many of you are tuning in tonight to get some updates on the school reopening plans. Just so everyone has an idea of where we are currently in the planning process and what lies ahead. Tonight, we'll be getting updates about the work that is going on with the various reopening committees. These committees have been meeting for the past few weeks and continue to meet and discuss the three different options for reopening schools in the fall: in-person, hybrid, and remote models. There have also been other subcommittees who've been discussing special education services, facilities, and communication strategies. This work should be wrapping up this week, and the three plans will be presented to the committee at our next meeting on August 4th. The committee will then be discussing and ultimately deciding which option we think would be best for the Chelmsford schools to open up sometime the following week. So this week is essentially an update of ongoing work. Next week we'll have a formal presentation of the different plans, and shortly after we will make a decision on which plan we'll be going with when school starts. Okay, so our first agenda item is approval of the minutes from our meeting on July 7th.
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting on July 7th, 2020.
Second.
All right, any corrections, any comments on the minutes from the 7th? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Okay, next up, any good news we want to share?
You know, I really did not collect a lot of good news because there's not a lot of people around right now, but it looks like the good news is we're working on some plans.
Anybody else have anything they want to share? I'll just mention, although I wasn't able to attend, I did hear that the blood drive that was sponsored by the Boosters Club was a big success, so I want to thank the Boosters Club for providing that service to the community. All right, so we are now to our first public input part of our meeting. Just as a reminder before we start, that we have, I think, 4 or 5 people registered to speak, so if we could limit our comments to 3 minutes, so everybody has a chance. Also, at this time, we won't be responding to any comments or questions, but we will try to get to any questions that you might have during that portion of our meeting agenda. So I'll turn it over to the superintendent, and we'll see how this works.
All right, thank you and good evening, everyone. We're going to try this model tonight where we have public participation coming through GoToMeeting. So this is synced up with Chelmsford Telemedia, so people will be able to see and hear comments live that the individuals will be bringing us. And what I'm going to do for us in the room is just project the faces of the speaker up on the board here. So just to make this work a little bit more efficiently, on our school committee agenda, say for this meeting and then going forward until we're back in a full in-person model, it would just be helpful if anyone who wanted to speak under public participation just shot me a quick email, and then I can just kind of load the people in. I'm going to call on them, unmute them, and they can make their comments. They can continue to watch from the GoToMeeting link, or you can also watch from Chelmsford Telemedia link. And then it is always recorded and posted on Chelmsford Telemedia site. So we did have 4 individuals who emailed me and requested to speak. So we'll actually just go in the order that I received them. And the first one was Lauren Cochran. So I am going to unmute Lauren. And Lauren, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so you are up.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, we can.
all right, great. So thank you all for hearing me today. I did send you a comment. You probably all have it in front of you. Basically, I know that you're working very hard, not only in trying to work on reopening of schools, but at the same time trying to integrate anti-racist materials into the curriculum. So I did look back and find a link from Linda and Dr. Hirsch about professional development, So I'm just hoping that there will be a timeline to include these anti-racist books, literature, films, required viewing for all students, K through 12, and to see how you'll have a timeline to incorporate these. More important thing I want to talk about is professional development for teachers and how we as teachers can speak to students about these subjects. So I'm wondering if there's had been any talk about bringing in outside speakers to discuss these topics, because I do find that this is a difficult subject for many people to talk to students about. Obviously, I'm hoping that we will all be anti-racists. So that's my statement, and I know you're doing a good job working on it, but I want to make sure that there's a lot of follow-up with this very important topic.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker of the evening is Laurie Grant. So Laurie, hang on one second. I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, it doesn't want to unmute her.
Laurie, are you by chance muting yourself? Can you check and see if you can unmute? There you go.
Better?
Yes, so you're now live at the school committee meeting to make your comment.
All right, first I'd like to thank the school committee for allowing me to speak tonight. I just was wondering, have you taken into account the number of teachers?
Oh, Laurie.
We were doing so good, too.
Oh.
Oops, hang on, we'll see if we can get her back.
If she can hear us, just let her know that she's been,
Laurie, can you hear us? All right, here's what we're going to do then. We're going to put Laurie on hold for a moment. We'll go on to the next person. I think we.
Ask them to identify their residences.
Oh,
and
that's
stuff.
true. I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
That's okay.
So, Laurie, if you can hear me, we will come back to you in a moment. We're just going to move on to the next speaker if they are here. And there's a question mark on these next two individuals if they are actually going to speak or if they wanted me to just read their statements. I'm not seeing their name up on the screen, but if an Emily Sloan is on, if you want to unmute yourself, you may. Okay, I don't think Emily is with us, so I'll actually just read her her statement. It says, "Hello, I did want to send over one question for the school committee meeting tonight. DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, has indicated that special education and preschool students should be prioritized for in-person learning to accommodate their complex needs. I wanted to confirm that this is being considered in Chelmsford for both CHIPS and Lions Pride learning models. Also, I believe Lions Pride is considered daycare, so will other requirements from the state be utilized so they can open full-time? These young students need their therapies in person and often cannot benefit from remote options. Please let me know if you can how this is being prioritized. Thank you so much." That was a question from Emily. Are you okay? If you need assistance, just put
Would
your
you
hand
like
up
a
and we'll come
water?
over and help you. Okay, I see Laurie is back. Are you back, Laurie? Laurie, can you hear us now?
Oh, I can, I'm back.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to give you the floor then again. Why don't we hear your comments at this point?
Right, welcome to Teaching with Technology. So what I was wondering is, have we taken into account the number of teachers who are going to be using the Families First Coronavirus Response Act to take a paid leave of absence because their children's school is being closed and the DESE is placing the responsibility onto the parents for their children's attendance in online learning? And do we have any idea how many of those teachers will not be able to be in school 5 days a week? And are we still able to open schools without them in attendance? In addition to that, the plans for this are only going to be announced August 10th or later. So it's going to be a last minute situation. Is our plan flexible enough to move forward and take into account these changes that may occur?
Okay. Thank you very much for the comment. We heard it all.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Just as an aside, these are things that we have considered, and we will be covering them in the reopening plans. So these questions have come up previously.
Excellent.
All
Thank you.
Is there a Rachel Donovan online? I don't see the name Rachel. I just want to look for one more name. Rachel? Okay, I will just read Rachel's statement then. It said, "Hi, Dr. Lang. As the town plans for what school may look like in the fall, what has your outreach process been for including families of color in the conversation? Has the outreach been multilingual? What have your strategies been to reach out to low-income households who might not be tapped into social media or the school's website?" And she thanks us for taking that into consideration.
Now, we did get an email from Emily. She had difficulty logging in, so she just thanked us for reading her statement.
Oh, good, okay. And those were the couple of registered speakers and the few public statements that I had at this point in time.
Okay. And, we've gotten a couple more emails, when we first got here, so we'll read those in our second public input session, part of the meeting. Okay.
I actually had one more prior.
Okay, you want to read it in? Sure, yeah.
This is from Emma Papo. I wanted to send you some concerns prior to tonight's school committee meeting. I know that the return to school planning is underway, but I am not aware of any details. As a household with 2 working parents, one essential worker who must be out of the house, the other is currently working from home, but is the primary income earner for the family and cannot take hours of the day to teach and support kids' education. And 3 elementary school children. It really concerns me that there's so much potential for hybrid or fully remote plans. What is the district going to do to support families who cannot fully commit to assisting young learners from home because they have careers that need to be focused on during normal working hours? Thank you for your time and dedication to the kids and families in our town. Emma Papo.
All right, anybody else have any that they received prior to the meeting? And
I have some, but it's cumulative and it's about one of the issues on the agenda, so I'll just.
we'll do it, when it comes up or at the end
Yes.
if we don't. Okay. All right, anybody else? Okay, all right, so we're going to move on to new business, and the first item of new business is,
Dennis,
I'm sorry.
can I interject for 1
Absolutely.
second? I just don't want to throw people off, so I do think there were a number of people who logged into the meeting, because I can see a lot of names up there, who are probably using the GoToMeeting site as a way to watch the meeting, and they still can, because it is basically projecting the Chelmsford Telemedia link. I hadn't planned on keeping it live for the whole meeting, but for this one I will. I'm going to keep it up just so that they can listen in the background. But I need to basically close the cameras down. So you're only going to see, if this is a viewing audience watching from GoToMeeting, you're only going to see the Chelmsford Telemedia link of the meeting and then hear the live discussion on that, because I need to repurpose my computer for the rest of the meeting. So I'm basically going to mute everyone so that there's just no distraction. Keep it live so you can watch via this link. But it actually, in the future, might be easier for you to watch right on the Chelmsford Telemedia website where they air the meetings live, just so you have an uninterrupted link. But I don't want to put everyone off who's already come in through this format, so I'm just going to reduce the screen, close the cameras, and you can continue to watch. Okay, thank you, sorry.
Let me know when you.
Oh, you
you're
know,
good?
you
Okay,
can go ahead. I
okay,
just
okay.
wanted to give them
Okay,
the
yep,
message so that
okay,
they weren't
great.
thrown off.
All right, so our first item of new business is superintendent evaluation process. So in your agenda packet, you should see the evaluation summary with the overall ratings for the superintendent, along with each committee member's evaluation of the superintendent and the 4 standards, and a summary statement about the superintendent's achievements over the last year. Along with this, you'll find some comments and suggestions that were made in the individual evaluations on the following pages. So what I will do at this point is I will just read into the record the ratings on the first page, along with the summary statement, and then if any members want to add anything or highlight any of the points in the comment section, we can do that afterwards. So overall, the overall rating for the superintendent for 2019-2020 is proficient.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you, go ahead, it's right in the back of the room.
So for those who are watching at home, superintendent is evaluated in 4 different standards as either unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. So overall, superintendent was given a rating of proficient. In the standard of instructional leadership, he was given a rating of proficient. Under management and operations, he was given an overall rating of exemplary. In family and community engagement, he was given an overall rating of exemplary. And professional culture, he was given a rating of proficient. Okay, and again, the overall rating was proficient. So I think those are all very good marks. I think all the committee members' individual ratings are also along there, as you can see, and he was proficient and exemplary in all of the standards by all the members. So just reading the summary comment, says, to say that the 2019-20 school year was an unusual one would be an understatement. What started out as a normal, very productive year got turned on its head due to the threat from the COVID-19 virus. Despite this unpredictable, unprecedented situation, the Chelmsford school system not only survived, but it thrived under the leadership of Superintendent Lang. While a lot of this was certainly due to the thoughtful, responsive reaction to these events, much of the success seen at the Chelmsford schools with dealing with the situation came from the stable academic and financial systems already in place. With a dedicated and professional staff working with motivated students and supportive families, the transition, while certainly not easy for anyone, was more easily achieved than it was in many other communities. The budgets formulated and managed by the superintendent not only provided for the smooth operation of the district before the pandemic struck, but enabled to continue to provide all the necessary resources to continue to provide a quality education, not just this year, but also into next year, where the financial situation is ambiguous at best. Facilities continue to be well-maintained, and an eye to the future exists through new programming, development of a new strategic plan, a flexible 10-year capital plan, MSBA building proposals, and enhancements to school safety and security. The superintendent continues to promote a collaborative environment evidenced by numerous public forums, input groups, and surveys, and a successful contract negotiation with all 4 labor unions. This year in particular, the superintendent's communication with staff, parents, and students made for an informed, positive learning and working environment despite a difficult situation. So again, overall rating of proficient, I think well-deserved, and just want to say, job well done. I don't know if any other committee members want to make any additional comments. I tried to kind of summarize all the positive and negative, well, not negative, but positive comments that people had and suggestions people had. So if you want to point any out, by all means. So anybody want to add anything?
I think overall, I think all I would like to say is it was an extraordinary year, and I actually can't even remember before we went out. It just seems like it was years ago. And I agree with the summative paragraph that if it hadn't been for the stable systems in place, I'm not sure that we would have been able to achieve as much as we were able to achieve. I think that one of the things that going out on the remote plan did for us was to highlight the things that we do really well and to point out some of the things that we need to improve. But overall, I think that given that we had to do it in such a rapid manner, I couldn't be more pleased with the way that everybody really pulled together under your leadership in order to make it as successful experience as it possibly could be.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I just wanted to say, I mean, again, it's been kind of an extraordinary year, and the fact that we've held together is a pretty good testament to the amount of work the administrators and teachers and everybody have done. So it reflects in your evaluation. And one of the things I was really happiest with is how we handled, funding and money, because all of that changed all of a sudden. So, yeah, without all of that work, I mean, I can't imagine where we'd be. So I was really glad my kids were in Chelmsford, for sure.
This was just a wonderful way to have my first year on school. It's just a nice way to start.
Baptism by fire.
It was difficult. I mean, we all know how difficult it was to pull it together, and we know that not everyone in the area did as well as we did, and those of us who had to teach that way know how tough it was, and for it to work as well as it did is a testament to administration and everyone involved. And, parents, students, everyone involved in the system.
I didn't give you any P minuses.
I noticed.
I think the year shouldn't be defined just by what happened at the end of the year. I personally think the year started off extremely well with the beginning of the strategic plan and the discussions and bringing everybody into those discussions, and I truly appreciated that. The end of the year was a blimp, but a big one. And I know that, we did it better than a lot of other school districts did. But I think what makes me wanted to give you those proficients and a couple of exemplaries as well is that you were truly able to try to bring everybody into the picture, and for me, that means a lot. The communication part, especially with parents during that time, was extremely important, and I thought that in many ways you anticipated some of those communications, which was really great to see. So there was a lot done during the year, and I think it put us in good standing for what moves forward, even though this coming year will be an even more challenging one. So look forward to continuing to work with you on it. Thank you.
No, thank you, everyone, and thank you for your comments. I do appreciate them. It helps me kind of, take a look and reflect on the year. What went well, what could be done differently. I think we were really in a strong point last year. We got some good momentum behind us in the fall and going into the winter. We were really doing a lot of good things, and, COVID kind of hit. I don't think that really derailed everything that we had planned. I think it just makes us step back and maybe adjust a little bit some of our pacing or our timelines. But I thought it was really overall a successful year, and the only reason that our remote learning plan for really the spring, and it was week to week. At one point, we didn't know if it was going to be week, 2 weeks, through April vacation, then it ended up being the whole school year. It was really, the staff in the district, and I think they felt very supported by the families as well. Even as we get into a little bit later on tonight, some of the survey results from the parent survey that we had done, I think everyone realized that, everyone really tried to go above and beyond to make it as successful as possible. There was a big learning curve for everyone involved. It was not easy work for anyone, parents, students, or staff, but everyone really did rally to come and take care of each other and to make it as productive as possible. So I appreciate, your guidance, your support, and leadership also during that time. But I very much obviously enjoy working here, and thought it was another successful year overall, and look forward to, keeping us on track this coming year as well. So thank you.
I forget, do we have to take any sort of formal vote, or is just
You do need to vote to accept the overall evaluation document and to place it on file.
so I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the overall summative performance evaluation for the superintendent for the 2019-2020 school year as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay,
Thank you.
great. All right, next item, final FY20 end of the year budget report.
Yes, I'm going to ask Joanna Johnson-Collins, our Director of Business and Finance, to review the fiscal 20 end of the year report and some adjustments we need to make to close the books on last year. And then, obviously, we're going to start to look at 21. So, Joanna.
Thank you. Included in your packet is the regular year-to-date budget report of our $61 million budget. Also is the grant and revolving fund balances and the 3 student activity accounts, the high school and the 2 middle schools. So I'll start with the budget, and we've landed on our $61 million budget. I didn't repeat the variances we've been talking about all year, but at the end of the year, we still were favorable in many areas. So in order to give our revolving funds more of a favorable or carryover balance at the end of this year, we did make some entries. And this is kind of a 2-page, if you want to look at the summary document, and then there's a little 1-page summary of the $61 million budget. We were still favorable in a lot of areas, such as utilities. I'm just kind of going over some of the bigger ones. Custodial, supplies. So some of the things that we recorded to the revolving funds could have also been charged to the local budget. We have a choice. For example, the biggest example would be the bus. We code normally 80% of the bus to the local budget and 20% to the revolving fund. So since we were favorable in areas like utilities and custodial and supplies, we put part of the bus to the local budget, more of the bus to the local budget, thereby increasing the ending balance of the revolving fund as we go into fiscal '21. So the summary below, there's 9 areas. 2 of them are very small that went over just a little bit, that I figured we just address at year end so that the final reports don't show them being unfavorable by that tiny bit. But the other 7 were entries to give the revolving funds, namely transportation, athletics, student activities, and use of facilities, a more favorable balance at year end by funding some of the stuff from the revolving funds. I'm gonna pause a little bit and see if you have any questions on that before we talk about the final transfers.
Any questions on,
I just have one on athletics.
Yep.
Are we paying the turf out of the athletics fund?
No, there's actually a separate fund for turf.
It's a revolving account.
It's a revolving account, yep, and.
Are we all set for that? Because I know we didn't probably have much revenue in the spring.
Right, so at the end of this fiscal year, and this is the little color-coded one, kind of towards the end of the financial reports, the turf fields are going to have a carryover balance of $118,724.
Okay.
So we'll be okay for another year, but if we don't rent for another year, we'll have to make a decision on what we're gonna do.
Okay, thank you.
I think just as a way of providing a little more information, was it at the May meeting, I believe, we actually voted to transfer the cost for the premium and the interest payment for the bond this past year, because we really didn't have any revenue coming in since the spring. I don't know that we really opened up in the spring at all. We only had fall revenue. So we ended up making those payments from the local budget, not the athletic revolving fund.
Okay.
So just to provide a little bit of cushion. So that's why you actually have kind of a surplus or a balance in that account at this point. If we hadn't done that, and we would have had to have paid the money out of the revolving fund, I think we still would have been in the black, but it wouldn't have been by a significant amount of money. So we basically have utilized excess funding in the local budget to help float that year's payments.
The only reason I asked that was since we were transferring money, I didn't know if that was an account that we should consider, but it sounds like we're all set.
You did consider that earlier this spring. We brought that forward when we knew that there was going to be no.
The May meeting.
The May one.
Right, and we did,
Took care of that.
yep, I think,
So long ago.
93,800, the local budget funded to help.
okay, other questions?
Okay. I didn't know, Dennis, did you want to take the motion on the transfers first and go through the other areas, or do you want me to go through everything
I
first?
think we'll take the motion on the transfers first. if
Okay.
That's okay with everybody?
I recommend the school committee vote to approve the FY 2020 local operating budget transfers totaling $707,148 from 24 favorable DESI categories to the 9 DESI categories noted above.
Second.
Okay, any questions on that, what that means, and? Okay, and again, I asked actually for that second page there, just to see what accounts it was coming from and which ones they're going to, and that's, I thank Joanna for putting that together just in one place instead of having to go through the whole munis report, so. We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote, Maria,
Yeah, yes.
John?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay, so 5-0.
Thank you. So the next page is just a one-page summary of the 61 million and what was spent this year by all those categories. And then behind that is the regular year-to-date budget report with all the account detail. And then after that is the grant and revolving fund balances. So at this time of year, you know, most of the grants, well, at the top, we are carrying over, well, all the 19 grants that are multi-year are done. The fiscal '20 grants, we are gonna be carrying over into, next year, which, will be helpful. They are multi-year grants. The middle section is some of the, private grants, and then also the, circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker balance at the end of the year, we're gonna carry over $3,014,088, which is at the top. So going into next year, we have that $3 million carryover reserve. Down at the lower portion are all the revolving fund balances, including school choice. So the school choice balance is close to 1.8 million. And then all of the other ones have balances that we may need to lean on if our financial situation changes in '21 or '22. The next, any questions on the grant or revolving fund?
Are we gonna get another payment from the state for the circuit breaker?
We got 5,
Oh, we did, okay,
yes, of course,
You're not happy about that, but we got it.
all right,
we got 5.
thank you.
So next year, hopefully, we'll get 4. Okay. And then the next few pages are the student activity account balances for the high school and the 2 middle schools. And then all the detail of the balance by club. So a lot less activity at the end of the year with those, but all still good balances. Any questions?
Good job. Very nice
Thank
job.
you.
Budget
Yeah.
again this year.
A lot of activity, obviously during the closure and whatnot, but it was nice to kind of bring the fiscal '20 budget to a close. That one summary sheet with all the different colors, I think really is kind of key. It just shows that, our reserves are sufficient to help us through, this next year or two. If it's, we still don't know what's going to happen with the state budget and different federal grant budgets and whatnot, but we have sufficient reserves to, I think, help us through that. We still have that set aside of the school choice funds, which is going to be helping pay for the one-on-one computer initiative, which again, the timing couldn't have been better going into last year and finding ourselves in a remote environment. So I think that was very positive. And, the first action of some of those transfers actually provides us just a little bit of cushion within some of those reserve funds or revolving funds. Because again, next year is still a little unknown. So we'll have a little bit of cushion at that point. So.
Have they
Thank
only
you.
decided on a temporary budget through October? Or is that?
I have not heard that. I know a lot of municipalities and communities are voting their 1/12 budgets. I did see something come out today. What we had been hearing was that the state legislature was going to meet, and hopefully by the end of July, come up with a local aid resolution. Even though the numbers wouldn't be final, they would basically indicate, when the number comes out, it'll be no less than whatnot. On the school side, the Chapter 70 side, we were hearing no less than level funding over last year's number. But I have not seen anything definitive. Nothing, as of noon today, had come out of the State House to my attention on that front. So I still think everyone has been pushing for that. The deeper you get into these 1/12 budgets, the more difficult it is to make an adjustment if the revenue projection or the state aid number is really going to come in lower. So I know as tough of a position it is for us, larger urban districts who are more dependent on state aid to run. It really puts them in a difficult spot. So I know there's a lot of pressure being put on the legislature for this right now. I think a lot of kind of waiting and seeing was tied to some potential federal money that could be coming. And I know there was hope that maybe at the end of last week or early this week, there might have been some type of a federal relief bill specifically targeted towards states and municipalities. But as of today, I know that still hadn't gone through. So we're still just kind of waiting. But as soon as there is any definitive, even that initial guidance, if there is that resolution, I'd certainly reach out to you and let you know that. I know Town Manager Cohen's looking for the same through his groups, but we hadn't received anything as of today.
And the CARES Act runs out at the end of December?
Yeah, there were different elements of the CARES Act. There was some CARES Act money specifically targeted towards municipalities, some that came towards schools. They all have different end dates for the use of the funds. Do you happen to know them off the top of your head? Didn't recall them.
So there's one that goes until 2022. That's the $311,000 one. That was the first one that came out. There's a town one that ends in December, and then there's another new school one that just came out that ends in December. So very short-term, one-time help.
Besides the 300,000, how much more do you anticipate that we might get?
So the new one that just came out is close to 1.1 million, and that's the one that ends in December. And we have to have that, decide what our plans for that are by the end of August.
That's the one, the targeted assistance per student
Yes.
to deal. I know a lot of districts are utilizing that for like their PPE
Fees,
purchases and things like that. I think that's why that has the December 31st date on it, because they want you to basically prepare for the fall and schooling and whatever PPE you might need to provide. The one we're gonna have some flex in is that $300,000 one, because again, it can carry us for the whole year. There is also some talk, I'll have to talk with Town Manager Cohen about this also, the $3 million-ish one that went to the municipalities does have the December 31st end date, but there has been some dialogue at the federal level about trying to provide greater flexibility as to how that money can be used. And I don't know if that would ever come as part of a funding strategy to be able to offset any reductions in, say, state local aid. But as of right now, it still had a very prescribed number of elements that it could qualify for. So we're watching that.
So the 300,000 plus the 1 million plus, is that any of that tied to, say, if people wanted to take, I know the FMLA has a specific CARES Act component. Is that tied, is that money in for that?
The 1.1 is really PPE
Okay.
procurement type funding. I don't know that I'd have to look at the regs to see if you could use it for the other. The 311 is really more targeted for programming.
Okay.
And it really wouldn't go that far if that was the case. The 3 million number one that the town received can go to basically backfill any of your costs associated with COVID from last March, right through December 31st. So that could be like, say, extra, policing or fire or schools. We tapped it to help pay for the adult meals with our feeding program. We have to just work with the town and figure out what the strategy for the spending of that money is. I would have to look and see if it would be permissible or not to pay those kind of COVID-related expenses. It may be, but that was still a very short window on, I think it was like a 2-week kind of paid portion of that, and the rest was almost like an FMLA, like the rest of the 10 weeks was an unpaid type program. So we would have to take a peek at that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Continuing with Joanna, I'm going to ask her to review the item number 3, which was the student activity account audit for Chelmsford High School. If you recall, we're required to do an external audit every 3 years on our revolving funds. We got into the practice of just doing the high school 1 year and the middle schools the other year. So every year we're doing one kind of major audit of the student activity funds. We stay in compliance with DESI, and this year happened to be the high school one. So we have that report back.
And it'll go on their website, and then they also still send us bound copies, so you're welcome to those too. So the auditors were here in March, right before the first week of March. And they provided this summary. So there was the balances from the year that they audited, so more historical than the reports I just presented to you tonight. And then they just had 3 recommendations, which is, I think, an improvement from 2 years ago, the first time it was audited in a few years. So one of them, I mean, you can read on, your own. I don't want to read to you, but somebody that's on the thing, and they opened up their mic.
Okay.
But you know, we always look at their recommendations and see if we can make improvements and, you know, going forward. So any questions on the audit or on their 3 recommendations or?
Are these things that we're looking to improve on, like, in the future? And, you know, some of the things like their recommendation that not to have faculty advisors get reimbursed for a certain amount without prior authorization, that type of stuff.
So, right, there's some things you just cannot get around. There are just some, I think we've shown great improvement where advisors don't have to put out any money on their own to get reimbursed. We've always try to get the vendors to just invoice us. That's our preferred method. But sometimes there's just some vendors that just won't. And they require a credit card, and we try to help the clubs with alternative choices. But in the end, the principal can okay it, which they do ahead of time, or not. And but we have gone to just having the advisors do it. In the past years, they've had parents and stuff, and we've really moved away from that, and it is just the advisor now.
So, question on this. These are the activity funds for ongoing activities that students run, student-run activities essentially at the high school. And it looks like the balance in this is like $260,000 just about.
Right.
So this would come from fundraising and things that happened during the year for those particular students who were involved in the activities. I don't know what the standards are and if there are any in terms of actually applying the funds for the particular activities as they're ongoing for that year. They're not run like a nonprofit. I don't know if any of these are separately organized and so on. So my concern is there's quite a bit of money there to be used for these activities, and therefore a particular club and so on. At what point do we address this and say, okay, if you have $100,000 in your account, it needs to be expended for this particular year and so on. So I think it returns to the fact that we need to go back to the discussion on activities when we can. I know we're in trying times right now. It was supposed to happen, some months ago. I think we should reconvene that and give this some deep thought on how activities run, and discuss it with all the people who are involved in activities to make sure that this is, distributed to the students and used for students when they actually contribute to these accounts, and that they get the benefit of what's done in that particular year, if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there are very kind of prescribed rules around the use of the funds or even like the fundraising. Typically what happens is the student group that's authorized, and these are all of our authorized groups, would meet with their advisor and kind of come up with a strategy for the year. They might want to fundraise a certain amount of money for an event or a trip or something like that. And then, typically they do utilize the funds within a year for the activity. Last year was a little unique just because a lot of activities that were planned for the spring didn't happen. The other thing is some of these clubs that do have like some of the music ones, they might have like a big trip or a big event, like say a year or two out, so they actually start their fundraising early. But I would be very comfortable saying we certainly could have discussions with the advisors that they really know how much money they have, and they have a kind of a roadmap for how they plan on spending that. But it is, it's the club advisor that basically is in charge of the fundraising, the depositing of funds and whatnot. Either the high school principal, the middle school principals do have to sign off on it. And ultimately, all of the checks are administered through the business office, so that's like another set of checks and balances. If there were specific questions about like different clubs or, why they may have money or not, again, I think you're going to see overall the balance in the funds has been a couple $100,000. I don't think that has changed greatly. But last year in particular, there were some activities that were planned for the spring that just didn't come to fruition because we weren't in school.
Okay, but I think when we can, we should return to the activities and to that little subcommittee that was being formed, to make sure we meet and discuss what's going on with activities.
Yeah, the subcommittee that was being formed, though,
Part of the
wasn't to talk about this. It was to talk about the stipends for the advisors and the coaches that were outlined in the contracts. This is more the money that the clubs actually just generate to kind of be self-sufficient, because we don't have a lot of local budget funds that we put into the clubs.
Okay.
And the advisors are not paid from these funds. So the
Okay.
advisors themselves are paid from the, either the local budget or the revolving fund, if the kids like pay a fee. But it
Not from activities.
no, this is more like, I pick one here. You know, if the badminton club, you know, decided that they wanted to buy new badminton nets, they might run a, you know, movie night, a fundraiser, they raise $100, they then use the $100 to buy nets. It'd be something like that.
Okay.
But on the other end, I know what you're talking about, but that was more kind of looking at the stipends that we pay to the actual advisors. You know, the number of times clubs meet for that pay and things like that.
Okay, so we don't require a budget for each club, what the plan is in terms of spending and so on.
No, that's really kind of school-based, but even within the clubs, it's very, you know, kind of club-specific. There's no across-the-board, a club has to meet so many times, and they have to raise so much money. On a yearly basis, the students and the advisor just kind of get together and they put a plan in effect for whatever they hope to get done that year.
All right, any other questions on?
So it looked to me like there was two categories that these comments fell into, procedural and policy. So some of the procedural stuff I do think the advisors need to tighten up on. I mean, when we have 10 instances where the checks weren't turned in, you know, in the 24 hours. I mean, unless there was a really good reason for that, it's just not good practice, and I would like to see them adhere a little bit more towards the procedures that we have in place for, you know, making sure that things are accounted for. And then a couple places, Dennis, it talked about policy recommendations.
Yeah, on the student travel one.
Right, and I didn't know if we need to
Yeah, we can take a look at our policies.
reconvene our
Yeah.
policy subcommittee, or?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We can do that. Okay, anything else on the audit? Okay, next item,
This, where it is a financial audit, you would take a vote to
Oh, we do?
accept the
Okay.
audit,
Okay.
place it on file.
all right, we'll take a motion then to accept.
I recommend that we accept the report provided by Powers and Sullivan regarding the student activities funds at Chelmsford High School for the 18 to 2020, 2 years?
I think it was year ending 19.
Yes.
2019, okay.
Second?
Any further comment or questions? Okay, Maria?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye,
Aye. 5-0 to accept.
thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. This is item number 4 now, for those watching at home. This is just follow-up to the parent survey I mentioned earlier in the evening with regard to remote learning. The PowerPoint we had already covered at the last school committee meeting, but I just wanted to put it together in one packet so that if the viewing audience was looking at it, they wouldn't find the PowerPoint separate from the comment piece. But as I indicated last month when we reviewed the PowerPoint, there were a few open response questions on the survey that were taking a little bit longer to kind of code and analyze and come up with themes. And I had worked with an individual at UMass Lowell to help us kind of code and summarize that data. So you have a report that basically reviews the overall findings from the open-ended response questions. It's extensive. I'm not going to read the whole report for you because I know you had a chance to take a look at it. But it really, I thought, did a nice job of summarizing the parent perspective on how remote learning went, what went well for parents, what they would like to see happen again if we're in that situation, some different areas where they felt we could change or improve practice, so that came through as well. And, you know, there was some discussion even that got into the different modes of learning, whether it be synchronous, asynchronous. And these are certainly discussions that we can have in the coming weeks when we take a look at what our plan for the fall schooling is going to look like. There were a couple of different summaries by level. and then different skills that students would be working on as well that parents either appreciated or would have liked to have seen enhanced. So again, I thought the summary comments really jived with the overall presentation we'd done the week before, and just wanted to share that with you. This was also shared with the working groups, so that the working groups could have this data, because we didn't want them having to go through all the different open-ended responses and having to code this on their own. So the survey results, public, so they were shared with the working groups so that they can take this into consideration as they're working through their plans.
Okay. So you said all of these are being shared with all of the working groups?
Correct. Yes, the PowerPoint, and then the summary document.
Inclusions.
I can just speak to that, because I am able to sit on one of the groups, and this has been, those comments were important to the discussions we had.
I didn't see it in our group, but it's okay. I mean, a lot of these things were brought into the discussion anyway.
Okay.
But I did not see this, this summary at that time. It's fine. Again, a lot of these were discussed during
Yeah,
our
the
session.
summary document was only made available at the end of last week. It took me some time to get, so I don't know if your group has convened yet this week.
We did, but it was at the beginning of the week.
Okay. I mean, I do know these are out there, so if you haven't seen them yet, you very well may. All of the different facilitators for the groups did receive them, so
Okay.
that they could share this with their groups.
Any other questions or? Okay.
All right.
Personnel report?
Yep, next item is your June personnel report. Again, this is a report that our personnel office puts together for us each month that just details the activity within the district as far as new hires go, individuals who have resigned or retired from the district, and then very lastly, sometimes we have individuals that transfer from one position to another within the district, so that's earmarked as well. This particular report typically includes all the year-end retirements, so it's a little longer than usual. And again, you're going to start to see this is the June kind of closeout from last school year, but you are going to see the July and August one be extensive because we're in hiring season. So all in all, again, I mentioned at the last meeting, we're in very good shape as far as hiring for the fall is concerned. But this kind of closes out the 2019-20 school year with a little bit of a summary of who has left since that time, and who's come on board.
Question?
At our next meeting, we'll receive the one for July. Is that available next meeting, which is in 1 week?
Our next meeting is next week, so no, we usually
Right.
receive the report at the second meeting of the month.
Okay, the only reason I asked that is because I've had quite a few questions from folks about whether there have been recent resignations because of not being able to return or not wanting to return and so on. So people have been raising more and more concerns about whether we will have sufficient staff and so on for different models. So just, if we had those actual numbers more to date, if it's possible, at the next meeting, I think it would be helpful just to see where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to come into play, obviously, depending on what model we end up implementing, and we will have to have those discussions over the next couple of weeks. I can tell you off the top of my head, though, we've only had one staff member indicate that they were going to retire this year instead of coming back for next year. I have been out early part of this week. I don't know if anything else had transpired, but I've only had one so far.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I don't think it's going to be anything to kind of, sway the decision-making one way or the other at this point. I know that, typically, because we are meeting next Tuesday again, which is like the 4th, that really doesn't give a lot of time to be able to produce the whole July report. But I can at least, flag if there are any areas of concerns
Okay.
as we start our dialogue.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the personnel report? Are we good in terms of, are we hired all we need to hire at this point, or?
We still have a couple of outstanding positions that we're kind of tracking down. If you want, I can certainly give you, for next Tuesday, just a list of what the open positions are. That might actually just help you get a sense for what we're still hiring for. But no, we're actually in very, very good shape this year, but I can do that for you, because we know what's open. Were you trying to say something?
No.
Oh.
Okay, Now, return to school planning.
And no vote on that, it was just shared for information purposes. Yeah, just a quick verbal update for you. I know everyone is getting anxious about the return to school for the fall. We all are. We have been spending a significant amount of time in the district, really since the school year got out, talking about what the fall was going to look like. Really, for those watching at home, our next school committee meeting is really going to be spent largely talking about the different options we have to consider, the different work that's been taking place. As we talked about in a previous school committee meeting, we did put together some working groups that mirror the state level working groups that took place over the course of the spring to take a look at 3 options. And what we've basically been charged as a district to do is to generate a full return to school option, at the other end of the pendulum, a full remote learning option, and then some what they're terming hybrid options in between, or some, half in, half out, week on, week off, type learning options to be able to have there be some in-person schooling if you can't include in-person schooling for everyone. Early on in the spring and going into the beginning part of the summer, the Department of Ed, again, had asked us to come up with these 3 different plans. By August 10th at this point, we're supposed to communicate our district's desire to them. Or no, actually not our district desire, but what our 3 models would be. And then sometime after that, we need to make a decision on what we're going to implement for the fall. Originally, the Department of Ed was indicating about 80% of the model would be dictated by the state because they wanted uniformity across districts. And then really in the last 2 or 3 weeks' time, that has changed. And now they're actually asking districts to make the decision or make the selection. So it's now actually a local control or a local decision that the school committee is going to be asked to make. So what we're going to be doing is actually putting together all the work from the working groups to take a look at what we really view are like the best options for in-person, for remote, or for hybrid. We'll be starting to talk about that next week. We will likely schedule another school committee beyond that to really kind of have a deeper dialogue into which mode of learning we think we're going to go with, and then ultimately start to put our systems in place to support that mode. And be looking to, obviously, people kind of want to know what we're doing for the fall, be able to communicate that as soon as we can. But I realistically don't see that decision being finalized until early August, probably over the next couple of weeks. The guidance from the department continues to come out weekly. So we did receive some guidance last week on transportation. We received some guidance on special programs. Art classes, music classes, phys ed classes, things like that. Remote learning guidance may have come out while I was gone. Remote learning guidance is now out. So that's one that I have not read yet that I need to get up to speed on. But these will all be different documents that help kind of inform our decision making. I did put the all call out for staff and parents to participate on working groups, and I know most members are actually a member of working groups. But we put 5 together in the district. One charged with taking a look at personnel and all the different personnel implications of returning to school, staying remote, what some of the different accommodations and things may need to be. On the communications front, once decisions are made about which mode we're going to be going with, how to properly notify our staff and our general community, how to notify our parents about which option we've selected and why, so that they understand the reasoning. Then there's a teaching and learning working group, and actually it's a large group, so that actually has 3 subgroups. We have different individuals looking at what remote options look like, what hybrid options look like, what in-person options look like for our district. So those groups are meeting. We have a special populations working group that is really taking a look at special education programming, ELL programming. Those groups have convened. And then lastly, we have a facilities and operations group, because once we know which model we're going to go with, we need to make sure our facilities can accommodate them, and we have procedures in place to deal with all the different aspects of those plans. So I see really by the end of this week, those groups having kind of draft of final plans submitted to us, so that we can then kind of take the weekend and before the next school committee meeting, and even that special meeting that we'll probably have towards the end of next week, lay out some recommendations for you and get all the information in front of you so that we can start to make some decisions. I was very happy with the response we got to the request. We actually had more staff and parent participation than we could accommodate. So several of the working groups, in addition to having parents on the working groups, staff members on the working groups, we opened up forums where just the extra parents could lend input to the process to talk a little bit about their experiences from last spring. Again, what worked well, what they would like to see be different. Those were successful. Most of those sessions were actually taped as well, and I know Linda has created a section on our website that the videos are on, so if you were a parent who couldn't participate but you wanted to get a flavor for the conversation, you can go and watch a video to kind of hear. And then what I do see as probably in the next 2 weeks after we have kind of made our decision with regard to what's going to happen, we'll then start to host a series of kind of focus groups, or focus sessions, to inform the parents and the staff of what we've selected, why we've selected it, how it may impact them, and get that ball rolling. So again, there's a lot of work going on. There's just a lot of moving parts. Again, we're receiving guidance from DESE almost on a daily basis, and it doesn't look like it's going to end. I am in touch with other districts to kind of get a sense for what they're doing, geographically. So I'll be able to provide some input to that too by the time we get around to the decision-making process. But I'm very happy that people stepped up and were willing to work on the groups, because it was a big time commitment. So I thank them for that.
Any questions?
Did they do a staff survey, and do we have results from that yet?
The union had done a staff survey. I don't have the results from that. What we will likely do is, once we know which mode we're going to go with, we will then have a survey ready to go, to notify staff that this is the direction we're thinking of going in. Are there any issues we need to deal with, things along those lines? But I think there are so many moving parts, even when you look at like some of the different hybrid options that are out there, there are so many different moving parts that we need to better define which program or plan we'd be going with to be able to really get that input. But we will do one. I don't know if it probably won't be anonymous. It'll probably be like an actual, you need to tell us, and same for parents. You need to tell us what you're thinking at this point. Are you comfortable returning in person? Part-time, not at all. Do you want a remote option? So I do see that coming over the next week or two. But at that point in time, too, people are going to have to lock into the program that they want.
Can I follow up on that question, Donna? So, thinking about this and having to vote on one of these plans, I think for me, it would be important to know whether we're going to be able to staff the plan. Mm-hmm. And, for example, if we're going to have a full return to school, and we have 20% of our staff who is not able to teach in person, then it's a real problem to vote for that plan. So are you saying that we're going to get that information before we're going to do a vote, or are you planning to do it after we do a vote?
No, we would need some of that information ahead of time. I just don't know how definitive it will be. We'll obviously be surveying staff, but I think we need to know kind of what the different models are. Obviously, we know what's involved in a full return. In a full remote, though, there are still some logistics that need to be worked out. And then on the hybrid type options, I think we need to be a little bit more definitive about which option we'd be implementing, and then be able to send out. So next week, we'll only be talking about the 3 different options. You won't be voting. So we'll probably be saying, if we go with an in-person model, this is what it looks like. If we go with a hybrid option, this is what it would look like. And then if we go remote, this is what it's going to look like. You're basically going to, by August 10th, have to select those 3 options. You're not selecting which one you're going to implement, but you have to have a full remote, a full hybrid, a full remote, a full in-person, and a hybrid that we submit to DESE. Then, when we know what those 3 options are, we can then survey our staff to see what different issues we're going to have with staff if we implement the various options, and have that data to bring back to you, so that when you make a decision, you know that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, all we're doing next week is you're saying these are the 3 options, and that's it.
Even before that, like the Tuesday meeting, I don't even envision it being just like, here's your one option for hybrid. It'll be kind of a report out of what happened at the working group. These are the different scenarios we looked at. This is what, may make the most sense for us, but we'll actually kind of look through what the different working groups looked at and thought about what they took into consideration, what do they see as the pros and cons. And then internally as an admin team, we'll also be working with that data to basically recommend to you, all right, if we go with the hybrid model, this is the one we would recommend and why. And you would then actually receive that at a follow-up meeting before the 10th, where you would ultimately say, okay, yes, if we go with the hybrid, this is the model we want to go with. So then that would be conveyed to DESE by the 10th, and you would still have time. Now, again, you have as much time as you want. The parents are going to start getting restless, and they're going to want to know which one you're going to go with. But technically,
They already are.
right, but from DESE's standpoint, by the 10th, you just need to tell them what's your hybrid option, what's your in-person, what's your remote. And then we get to decide which one we want to implement.
Okay.
So for the hybrid and the full return, are there procedures in place for when somebody tests positive? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah, it is going to happen. It's a staff member, a student, it is going to happen at some point, and there are guidelines out on that. DESE has put some out. I'm also going to be meeting with our Board of Health. I did talk to Sue Rosa because, CDC may have different guidelines than the state guidelines. We want to make sure that whatever we're going to implement in Chelmsford, kind of passes muster with everyone that we need to get on board. And we also need to then be able to explain to the public what our plan is when that happens, because it is inevitable that it is going to happen.
I mean, are we going to tell other parents, like if it's a student in a classroom with 10 other kids or 20 other kids?
That is what's going to be worked out. Yeah, so that would be defined in the plan.
Yep.
Like there would be a whole notification plan, who would technically need to be notified, who would need to stay out of school, how long would they need to stay out of school, how are they going to receive services while they're out of school, what if it is the teacher? So yeah, all of that is going to be worked out and is going to be conveyed to everyone before we go back.
DESE document's like 15, 16 pages long.
It's extensive.
I understand
They have
I mean,
safety protocols document. It's
No,
like
I mean, I've
all the
seen
different scenarios.
I mean, I've seen the document, but I'm just saying, it's just good, we got to make sure we communicate it to our parents, right?
With that, we also have to operationalize it, because we're gonna have a lot of, feet on the ground in the different schools who are gonna have to be dealing with this stuff, really on a day-to-day basis with all of the different tasks that are ahead of them. But I will have all this information for you so that you can look at it ahead of time. And again, different plans, there are different guidance documents that kind of come into play more.
Yeah.
But it is probably going to take us, just, for the viewing audience, it probably is going to take us another 2 weeks to be able to figure out exactly what we're going to be implementing. I think the work of the working groups has been excellent. I think everyone wants to know now, just so that they can make some plans. But unfortunately, we just still do need a little bit more time to vet out some of these options. And also, again, we could be, now we still have a month before, say, school would start. Something could happen, health-wise, that could change the data, that could impact our decision as well. So I do think it's worthwhile to have the 3 plans, because we could be in any one of those 3 scenarios at the start of the school year, or in the fall, or in the winter. So we may as well know, all right, if we have to go from, full in-person to remote, or the hybrid to remote, or, back and forth, we need to know what our plans are going to be. So I think it's worthwhile.
Just out of curiosity, are we
Process.
going to rely on the testing that's available now? Is the school going to have its own testing? Access to test? Are schools in the state going to have access to their own testing?
I don't fully know. I don't think our own schools are going to have access to testing.
No, I'm just wondering if there's going to be a larger
There's
plan for
discussion
testing
about, like,
within the school district.
well, I think
Within
within
school
communities,
districts.
and that does have to be kind of worked out to figure out, if someone isn't feeling well or needs to be tested, where are they going to go so that you can get the test results back quickly.
Right.
You've got a lot of people kind of waiting in limbo while the results are out there. You wouldn't want a test you have to send in and wait a week for.
Right.
Hopefully it'd be like a 24 to 48-hour return. The governor has announced additional testing sites being opened up statewide. I have to think some of that has to do with reopening of schools and businesses for the fall, because people are going to need the access to the testing. And I do think the tracing also after the fact, particularly if we're now back in a school setting, is going to be critical. But again, this is such, kind of sensitive and timely information that we need to be on top of. Things can change week to week, but it is still going to take us another week or two to vet this fully out.
So,
You're starting your some more communication this Friday?
Me? Yeah, I'm queuing up my next communication. The weekly letters from Jay will be beginning soon. I was waiting for that remote guidance, so now that it's out, I am going to get that together. And what I'm going to try to do for the parents, just for this first time out, is summarize all of the different guidance documents that have come from DESE. If they, want to read, they'll be linked. So if they want to read the whole document themselves, they can. But I'm just going to provide a little summary. I'm then going to just talk about the work that the working groups have been doing behind the scenes and lay out a timeline for them that I think is realistic at this point with regard to when the school committee will be making decisions and when we can notify them of what to expect for the fall. So I'm hoping by the end of this week.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if maybe we could get out before our meeting so parents could be prepared.
Yeah, it's possible. I was, again, shooting for the end of the week. Worst case scenario, I'm back from vacation this weekend, so I could get it out this weekend. But definitely people should have it on their radar. And then, we certainly can actually push some messaging for our meetings over the next couple of weeks, just so that people know they're coming.
Yeah, I was actually
Yeah,
going to talk
We
about
can,
that.
but I
Candidate
don't know
thing
how
is
that's going to
important.
impact
Right, we
us.
don't know how it is,
Right.
but it's out there, and I think,
Yes.
just to acknowledge it, that's all.
I didn't know also as a school committee if we needed to take any votes with regards to the calendar.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's going to end up happening is once we actually make a decision about what's going to happen plan-wise, we then still need to be, and we're going to not just be doing it after the fact, but we need to be negotiating with the unions about how we're going to implement whatever plan we pick. So that will be ongoing. I know at the state level, there has been some push for allowing some additional time at the beginning of the school year to get geared up for whatever phase you go into. One of the outcomes from that was, I believe, the Commissioner of Ed ended up agreeing to reduce the time on learning requirement from 180 days to 170 days, which basically allows for, 10 less days of students to be in person at the beginning of the school year. That just basically kicks it to the local districts, though, to figure out, how that may be helpful. If it is helpful, if it's not, that then also needs to be negotiated, though, because even though kids don't necessarily have to be there, it doesn't say that they can't be there. It's just that the requirement is down. So that's like another negotiating item that we're going to have. Eventually, yes, you will have to update the calendar, but I wouldn't see you updating it before we actually know which plan we're putting in place. And we've had our discussions with the union and agreed to what we're going to be implementing. Then you would make a vote to amend the calendar. What I think we can do over the next week or two is just forecast for parents if something seems likely. So right now, we, a couple of years back, had started going back the Monday before Labor Day. So all staff come back for orientation that Monday, and then the students return Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before we break for the 4-day long weekend for Labor Day. We may be saying, you know what, under either scenario, we at least know that we're going to want those 3 student days that first week to be dedicated to staff so that they can kind of prep and plan for whatever model we're going to be implementing. So we potentially could tell parents, we don't know which we're implementing yet. However, we're not going to be starting at the earliest until X date, just so that you can plan accordingly. That might get flushed out in the next, week or two, but I don't have like a definitive right now that I can say, okay, we're going to push back the start of the school year until X date, until we really have those discussions with the union and know which would be best, given which plan we're going to implement.
So just to clarify, so next meeting, we're just going to be presented with all the information from the 3 plans.
The working groups, and we're going to start to talk about what the working groups talked about
Yep.
with regard to the various elements.
And we will meet before the end of that week to vote on the 3 different plans to submit to DESE.
Yes, we need to meet before the 10th to submit the plans. However, I will have to say, I do think DESE is going to push back the meeting on the 10th, the deadline. Not that I think we want to go too much further back just to pick our selections, but I do think DESE is going to now back off because they are hearing from districts that this timeline that they've given with the information just coming out now is coming out too quick. So I anticipate that 10th date being pushed back until a little bit later. But yes, we will probably meet either towards the end of next week as a special meeting or early that week after, before our regular scheduled second meeting in August, to pick our 3 options. It may become clear to us at that point which one we want to implement, and there's nothing stopping you from saying, all right, these are our 3 options, but we're implementing, A, B, or C. if we know at that point.
Okay.
But if we don't, we at least just have to vote to say A, B, and C, this is what we're sending to DESI.
I just want to make sure we're giving families enough time to make whatever plans that they need to be
Yes.
able to make.
Mhm.
You know, in terms of childcare or work situation or whatever it is, so.
Well, teachers too.
Yeah, and
Yes.
teachers, yes.
Teachers can.
Staff, bus
Yeah,
drivers,
everybody,
employees.
yeah. So, you know, whatever we have to do, I think, to, you know, put forth a timeline and stick to it or accelerate that timeline, I'm all for that, because I just think that, you know, people need to be able to prepare.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
it's gonna take families some time to figure out what they're gonna do, depending on, you know,
Yes.
which option emerges as the most viable and safe.
I think that that's so true. I mean, those are the comments I'm getting quite a bit. It was actually wonderful to participate in one of the groups, because one of the things that became so very clear to me is how dedicated each one of those teachers in that group really are to wanting to give the best education they can, even if it means that it's difficult to do. And I realize, you know, we've had questions about the teachers' children being able to work, so many things along the lines. But it was so clear that they want to do the very best for the students, and I think they're getting concerned about being able to deliver really quality product, and being able to teach the best that they can. So I was glad to see the 10-day thing, because we may need to give that time for being able to have, but by the same token, parents want to know, when are we going to start, because they've got lives to run, and including their children's lives. The other thing I want to mention from some of the comments that we've just made is that there are several people who have actually sent me charts of the impact of one infection on the potential of one infection on the entire school community that infection happens in. And the other thing that, and it's kind of terrifying, but the other thing that they've talked, quite a few people have sent me things on, is about substitutes. And what are we gonna do in terms of substitutes? Because, you know, they're not with the children on a regular basis and with the classes on a regular basis and so on. So that has quite a few implications, whatever model we do choose and what we vote on. I think there are a tremendous number of implications that may affect the personnel, the number of people we have to hire, the number of people we don't have to hire, and so on. So the sooner we can make it, I think, and know that we're making the right decision for our district, I think the better it is for the entire district.
When we put a plan forward, do we have to get DESI approval? Because before, if they were making 80% of the decision, they would have to approve it. Now that they're kind of passing it on to the district, if we say this is the way we want to go, do we have to get an okay from them?
Technically, they are indicating that, you know, we're submitting the plans and they're going to approve them. I do not understand how they're gonna read through that many plans that quickly and approve them, though. I think they're gonna rely heavily on, like, the attestation from the district indicating that this plan is gonna be in compliance with, you know, the learning requirements and A, B, and C. But if, the charge is basically to provide those 3 plans at this point, and, you know, be responsive to questions or inquiries they may have. But I don't see how they're gonna have time
Yeah, I think
to read through them all.
originally with the big push to the in-person, that if you couldn't go there, they were originally saying you have to give a reason why. But I don't think that they're keeping up with that requirement anymore, because where it was a change, because they were originally gonna tell us which one we were going with. Once they decided that wasn't gonna be the case, I think they lost a little bit of footing that way.
And just to Maria's point, I absolutely get, and Donna brought this up too, like the parents wanting to know. And I think, you know, what I struggle with also is finding that balance between, we really wanted to get parent and staff input on the working groups. So if it was just a matter of, you know, me sitting down with a few staff members and putting together the options, we could have done that very quickly, but it really would have left out the voice of staff and parents. And I think to basically stunt the process at this point, or to not allow it to go through, I don't think will produce in the end a product that, everyone might buy into, or at least I think everyone is going to feel that they were heard through this process, even if they don't agree with the particular plan we end up going with. I don't think someone's going to be able to say that, we didn't have input, or we didn't at least understand why you went with a particular plan. So, I wanted to be able to provide that, provide the time. It just obviously takes time to be able to work that through. And again, I think we have close to like 100 people working on these different, working on these, with these working groups. But I do think in the end, that really is going to help make a better product with, better buy-in from hopefully the staff and the students and the parents that are going to be involved.
Do you think it's important to mention too that, those plans are in place that you might have to flip from plan to plan? So this is always gonna be a moving target, just hopefully we don't get a, notice the day before. Hopefully there's a transition piece, but even if we start out with one of the 3 different options, it could quickly switch to another one based on what's happening. So I do feel like these, a lot of families are gonna be in this constant moving pattern of what happens if we switch over, and then hopefully we just, like I said, get to that, transition piece. So it's not just tomorrow morning you will start with this.
Right. Well, you've given some of the answers in terms of when you're gonna have the data, but I think some of that information is really important in making a decision on a plan. And I don't wanna make the wrong decision. I'd like to make the right decision for our district, and to have the most favorable thing for the most number of students, so that everybody gets the best education we can give under these circumstances. I'm sure that's how everybody else feels here as well. So for me, I think the importance is, what's our staffing look like, and how many of our families do plan to return, even if we offer either a remote model or a full in-person model, then how many of our families truly are returning to school? I think those 2 key things are very important to know.
Anybody else have anything else?
So I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of it in the next few weeks, so.
But it's a lot to consider,
Right.
No easy decisions here, so. All right, now we have a few different updates coming
Moving
up.
on, yep. So we have a few updates I just listed because we were pulling them together over the weekend. But Linda, would you mind reviewing some of the work that's ongoing with diversity and equity in the district?
Yep. So obviously in June, we had that conversation, just given the issues that were happening nationwide. And a lot of the lion's share of the work is actually more with the English and the social studies department, because it just makes sense humanities-wise. That's typically what they work towards. So the English group, I love the fact that they gave themselves a name. They're the Text Diversity Working Group. They did that on their own. We didn't give them that name. So what's nice is that they had some volunteers right out of the gate. Even back in June, we talked about this. And they've had a chance to meet 3 times so far, which is amazing given, all the other things that are happening around the district. They've been able to analyze some of their current texts, and you'll see that they're trying to brainstorm some lists for some other texts that they can incorporate. We also have many titles that we currently have that perhaps we haven't been using. So they've been having a chance to go through those titles to say, well, why don't we bring these titles back in? We don't just get rid of our books, we bring them back in. So they've had a chance to at least go through that. They have their list, they've come up with their different ideas that they would like to do, as well as providing professional development around it. And you'll see that I put in your memo that, English would like some stuff specific to English, and that's very typical. However, the 2 department coordinators are working together with some other teachers to try and come up with some district-wide PD, right? One of the best things to do is to have a lot of book groups where people can explore different topics within anti-racism, diversity, bias, and they can rotate those through. That's always been a very helpful thing for PD, for us to be able to say, okay, here's almost a 10-week module of working on with this book, and then teachers can go on to another one, so they're not just getting a one and done. I love the 1 book, 1 district idea, but sometimes it's difficult because it's not developmentally appropriate for the 3 levels. So they're doing that work right now, which is great, and we have a ton of teachers that are sure, we'll be right on that. So that's something we can work towards, is having some of these book groups that happen. One of the other things too is that you'll notice that under the social studies piece, Stephanie Quinn's been doing a lot of work at the elementary level because it does lend itself, obviously, the kids go to social studies class or they take their history classes in high school. So bringing in some of those texts that are appropriate. At the elementary level, they have for their new standards, actually at the middle and high school too, but they're now into topics. And those topics, so we have the domains, obviously, in math, we have the strands in English, so social studies have topics. And under those topics, she's been able to bring in a lot of the books for the teachers and create some lesson plans around that, which is, and they're actually guided readers for some of them too, which is level appropriate for students, which hasn't happened necessarily at the elementary level, so that's been fantastic. I know that in the past 4 years, she's already rearranged the scope and sequence at the secondary level, meaning middle and high school. So now it's time to really dive into the elementary level because it starts there, right? If we can get kids working on some of those things ahead of time, it becomes part of their topics. I know people talk about curriculum, like you can get all the curriculum in the world. It's really about the teaching. So the focus is really about teachers being able to have that chance to understand what it is that we should be really highlighting and bringing forward. And they're rising to that occasion. Nobody wants to be, not addressing certain issues. So those two departments are gonna really work on that. You'll also notice too that in this memo that I put in there, we have a lot of in-house PD that we run. It's separate. It can be synchronous, it can be asynchronous. Teachers can take graduate level courses with us. So if there's like a call to action of something like this, we can either create a course, resurrect a course, and I gave you some examples of that. So you'll see that, the civics course that was run through Fitchburg State, it's our people teaching it, but you receive 3 credits through Fitchburg State, was very well attended. And, then we kind of bring that one down and bring forward another class because teachers can only usually take one class a semester. So we can certainly resurrect that credit level class as well as the PDPs because not everybody wants to take a graduate level course. And the rigor of that, they want to just get the information that they can apply. So we have taken a look at all of our different programming that we have, and we also have the funds available to provide teachers to create additional coursework in this area. One of the best things you can do for PD is not try to put like a one type of PD only. So, because some teachers, again, want it to be in a course, they want it to be asynchronous, they want to be part of a book group. So if we kind of provide like an a la carte menu of different ways for teachers to access information around anti-racism, bias, diversity, then that's the best way to be able to help our staff because people are at different points with that. So I wanted to give you some of the examples of our flyers that go out and how that actually works. And we keep everything in our X2 management system, so even the graduate classes, we know who's taking what. They sign up for it like they would take a class if they were signing up at, university. So those are some of the things that are going on. It's not exhaustive, however, it's a good start. I'm excited that they were able to at least have these 3 meetings so far. And then you're gonna have to start thinking about how does this branch out to the other departments, right? It can't just be humanities specific. How can we incorporate some of the other departments into this as well, so it doesn't get too one-sided with, 2 different content areas.
Questions? Comments?
I'm glad we're doing the work, but
Yeah.
yeah, no questions though.
Yeah, you have to bring it to the forefront for it to actually be able to be addressed, right? You can't just do it once and then be over with it.
Did you have a chance to meet with that alumni group? I know you were. How'd that go?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I did, yeah, Linda and I.
Oh, you both
I'm
did,
sorry, I
okay.
thought you were looking at.
No.
Yeah, no, we actually had a nice meeting. I think it was like the Thursday night after our last school committee meeting. But, yeah, Linda and I and Dean McIsaac at the high school actually met with about, I think there was six or seven recent alumni to talk about their experiences with Chelmsford, what they would like to see the district look at, whether it was curriculum-related or just general inclusiveness within the curriculums in schools. And no, we had a nice meeting for close to 3 hours to kind of just hear from them and talk about like what what their experience in Chelmsford was like and how it could be more welcoming, any issues they may have had or I think a lot of it, oh, go ahead.
It was really interesting because a lot of the things they were bringing up, they didn't have the opportunity when they were in high school. I was joking around with them. I'm like, we can certainly put you all back in high school. Like, they were excited to see the dual enrollment classes, right? So that was new for them. And then they would bring up like these other topics. I'm like, oh yeah, we didn't have that when you were here. So just given when these kids graduated, and many of them were my former students, so I knew them, well, I was like, yeah, you just missed that. So I think that was exciting for them. I think that they just, want to make sure that they know that they're available to help. They will be more than happy to meet with us regularly, and they just don't want to see something die. So they were passionate about it, but it was a really nice conversation in general.
A lot of even the recent civics work that
Yes,
had come in
they were like-
statewide, they had just kind of missed over the last couple of years, schooling wise. But no, it was a very good meeting. But I view it very much as like a start. It's a group that we're going to stay in touch with. I know, Linda and staff have already been doing some work on it. So, no, it was very productive.
Other questions?
Has there,
I was gonna say, I had a chance to also meet with them as part of their Zoom meeting, and they are a very passionate group, and I'm glad to see that we're, taking some steps towards being able to address these issues. I do want to say that our ELA coordinator, Abby Dick, has been tremendously helpful, I think, in terms of working with some members of that group, in particular one student who's working on her gold project for Girl Scouts, which actually preceded a lot of this. But she's done really a nice job in terms of working with the kids and meeting with them and hearing suggestions.
okay, just a question in terms of, I understand about the curriculum, and actually I've also heard some very good input from teachers on what Stephanie Quinn is offering and the courses that she runs, which are thorough and well done. This is the comments I received, which is great. Do we have any thoughts and any plans of requiring or making it so that over a certain period of time, I'm not saying that's all done in the next 30 days, but over a certain period of time, that we actually offer something like what the Anti-Defamation League puts out there, which is the World of Difference Institute program, something like that, that teachers would, and staff, not just teachers, but everybody within the district would actually, and I'm not saying that that's the program to go with, just saying that as an idea, that over time, we have everyone actually exposed to and have access to this type of professional development, if you want to call it that, training, quote unquote, if we want to call it that, whatever we want to call it, but so that the entire working group that we have within the school system actually has exposure to anti-racism, diversity, inclusion, types of thoughts, and then is able to discuss it openly in classrooms and so on. So, and again, I'm not saying you can do this in 30 days, because there's no way. And I think that that's why the group will continue to remain pretty active, because they realize how pivotal a thing this is. I think the group also realizes that the town is changing tremendously, and that our schools will, and we can see this in the younger children, in the younger grades, it doesn't look exactly like it looks like at the high school level, right? So things are changing, and as they change, other districts have had to face this too. It would be very important for us as an entire community, including us here in the school committee, to have to do something that makes us aware of these issues right up front. You can't change people, but you can make them aware of things and how they then apply it. It also then becomes part of our culture, and it's a continuous community culture, and it becomes comprehensive. And I think we need to come up with some timeline where that's gonna happen. I love to see what you just presented today because, yeah, we're working on it. We've got it as part of what's being developed in curriculum, and it looks like it's accessible at all grade levels for the teachers. I think that it needs to go a bit further, again, not over the next 30 days, but over time.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you for that report. Student enrollment,
Yeah, this is just a quick update for you, and it's primarily targeted towards kindergarten, because this is numbers we always watch. The numbers held relatively steady for the last couple of reports. Again, we've increased two students overall from 371 up to 373. And again, this is, I'm not recommending action at this point for the school committee, because again, I think we need to define what model of learning we're going to be in for the fall before we start making staff adjustments. I will say, these numbers kind of being where they're at for July, we'll likely pick up some numbers in August in a normal year as far as going back to school is concerned, and I would likely be recommending that we add a class at all 4 schools. Again, we had budgeted for 2 additional floating kindergarten teachers. We ended up having a third teaching opening from the high school that I can float down to kindergarten. So we would technically be needing to find funding for a 4th kindergarten teacher in the budget, which we would do. It's that important to me that we would start off on the right foot. I just think we need to take the next week or 2 to figure out again which model we're going to be in, because we might need flexibility in staff, whether we're in a remote or a hybrid or, obviously the in-person model, if they were all coming in as well. This is a group, if you recall, we did survey specifically the parents to find out if they were going to be having their kids come to school in the fall or not, and the vast majority had questions. So we'd want to just define first if these students were returning or not, and as soon as we kind of define our model, we'll be able to survey this group again, have them lock into a decision, and then we'll staff it accordingly. But I just wanted to share with you the numbers, and they are holding steady at this point in time.
I think at the biome level, because of that complex that's going to come into existence and be fully 84 units, 2 and 3 bedrooms are there. And one of them, I think, is like by December, 24 units. I pass by it, it's looking better and better all the time. I think we really need to think about that, because that's going to increase those numbers.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was actually, the number that jumped out to me, Byam is always kind of straddled high, but South Row is the number that really has never been that high. And again, we're gonna do a little bit of kind of checking the residencies on these. I'm wondering if that could be the result of the Turnpike Road complex, because that is districted to South Row. Originally, I was concerned that was going to be districted to Center, but it wasn't. It was South Row. But we're going to keep an eye on these. And as I indicated, all of them, I basically at this point would be recommending the 4th teacher if this was a regular year or we were in person. But I just want to, again, we have a little bit of time. I just want to buy another week or 2 to figure out what mode we're in, be able to communicate directly with these parents. This was a group that I think we had 95% response from the parents in a survey. Obviously, they were eager for kindergarten within 48 hours. So I think we'll be able to make a quick adjustment with whatever we get from this group. And they're a captive audience, and we can get a survey out to them right as soon as we know. So.
Any other questions on enrollments? Student transportation.
It's gonna be a fun one. So this is the biggie. So as I've been away, one of the documents that I was able to read through a few times, and it really did take me a couple of times to figure out exactly the implications on, was student transportation. So this one had been kind of lagging for a while, and we were waiting to get clarity on this from DESE for weeks now. So this is one of these operational items that, regardless of, you may have the best plans in play for in-person or hybrid or remote, and one of these operational issues could throw a wrench in things. But basically, as I outlined in the memo here, there were several kind of guiding highlights that came out of this. And again, regardless of age of the student, because I know the DESE guidance talked about, students wearing masks from grades 2 through 12. anyone that actually rides a school bus this fall is going to be required to wear a mask, whether it's kindergarten or, up through grade 12. Everyone on the bus, staff and students at all times do have to wear a mask because of the close quarters of the buses. All the students on the bus are actually going to be seated one student to a seat, alternating seats. And there are a couple of charts on here that kind of explain for you how that's going to happen. If you do have two students within the same family residing in the same household, they can share a seat. So we'll maybe have a little bit of economy there, but this is significantly going to hamper our transportation for the fall. And then they are strongly recommending / requiring the bus windows to be open at all times during the operation. So that will be interesting come winter as we get there. But at this point in time, I was actually more concerned with the number of riders that we can get on a bus. So as you know, we contract for 29 big yellow school buses, and I really am only focusing right now on the big yellow school buses. Majority of our fleet are 77 passenger buses. We do also have 83 passenger buses. So on a 77 passenger bus, the maximum number of students you can ride on that bus is 25. So we're basically at about a third capacity of our buses. The 83 passenger buses can have a maximum of 27 students on the bus. Again, 33%. So we're basically restricted to having that few students on the bus. Desi actually did a nice job with the graphic, which is on page 2. What's the matter? Page 2 of the memo.
Trying to
That
figure out in what real world they were operating in. Sorry, I just.
again, sometimes your operational guidance doesn't quite line up with practical school guidance. So they outline here where you would actually be positioning students on the bus. So that's where you can see your 25 students on a 77 and your 83 on, I'm sorry, your 27 on the 83. As you go through the documents themselves, obviously, they want districts to provide transportation to as many students as they possibly can. They are strongly encouraging, and I am strongly encouraging families as we get there in the messaging, that if you have alternate modes of transportation for the fall, to please avail yourselves to them. Trying to transport our students to and from school is going to be nearly impossible for the coming school year. So if you can walk, again, I don't think we really have a lot of biking in the area, but if there are people you can carpool with, these are things that are being recommended. Even in special education, I was interested to see this, that they're even recommending special ed students as much as possible, if parents can self-transport to school, that they would recommend that. I obviously would recommend that as well if it's possible. Special ed parents who do have transportation services in their IEP could be reimbursed for providing that transportation. But the more students that can actually get to and from school this coming school year, or as long as we're under kind of COVID restrictions, the better it is going to be for us operationally to be able to pull off any type of in-person learning, whether it were full or even if it were hybrid. Because quite honestly, we cannot transport the number of students that we typically would during a school year with these restrictions of only operating our buses at a third capacity. One of the recommendations from DESE was to possibly stagger school start and stop times, even to stagger start and stop times within schools for particular grade levels of students. Again, that just doesn't work for all practical purposes. And we already utilize our same school buses for 3 different runs. So right now, every one of our 29 buses does a high school run in the morning, a middle school run, and elementary school run, and then they reverse in the afternoon. So we're already getting pretty much maximum capacity to our schedule without having to make a major modification. And I really don't know, I cannot foresee a situation where within one elementary school, let's say, you actually have different grade levels of students coming in at different times. Trying to make a schedule work within that school would be impossible, again, for programming. So I think the people that came up with the transportation guidelines may not be fully school people in that realm, kind of thinking about how you operationalize some of this stuff within a school setting. So one of the things that I, want to at least discuss tonight, but I am recommending the school committee do, and again, this is really to just give parents as much notice as possible. We are contracted for 29 school buses, and we really, at this point financially, cannot afford more school buses. Every school bus costs us $70,000 for a year to transport, $70,200 to be exact. But even if we had the funding, we wouldn't have the bus companies just don't have the capacity to add extra buses. So it's not even just a financial issue. But school districts, and again, we're not going to be the only ones considering this, school districts are required to provide student transportation to students in grades kindergarten through 6 that reside more than 2 miles from the school. Anything you do beyond that is really a local decision, and it's local jurisdiction. That's why you're allowed to charge a fee for anyone who is, say, under 2 miles, or anyone in grades 7 to 12. You're open by statute to be able to do that. I do not, again, with these guidelines, see us being able to transport anything but the bare minimum number of students that we are legally obligated to provide transportation to. And just so that we actually, can put some transportation in place, have some numbers to be able to create our routes off of, I would recommend the school committee for at least this coming year or through COVID, however we want to word it, that you only provide transportation to the students that you are legally obligated to provide it to, so that we can then tell those other students in grades 7 through 12 and in grades K through 6 that live less than 2 miles that they have to provide their own transportation to and from school. Now, a lot of these, as I indicate, a lot of these parents are the ones that will buy bus passes for their kids to ride the buses, and some have already registered and paid. I would also recommend we reimburse the families for the fees that they paid. We're not looking to hold on to the money, but we could notify them that unfortunately, because of these regulations, we just cannot provide that extra transportation this year, and your reimbursement will be coming. I do see one scenario which may be of some relief to some families, but if we implement this, and particularly at the middle school level, if we have 5th and 6th grade riders that are, say, going to McCarthy or Parker, and they have an older sibling in 7th or 8th grade who's already in the home, where the DESE guidelines allow you to sit in the same seat as a sibling, we could consider just allowing the older sibling in grade 7 or 8 to ride with the 5th and 6th grade student, because the bus would already be going to the bus stop. There'd already be one kid from the family going on the bus. There'd be no hardship for us to provide the extra seat to the sibling. We could consider that, because you wouldn't be tying up another seat. Beyond that, once we would actually kind of create the routes and create the assignments for the buses, if we had extra capacity, I'd be open to talking about, how could we benefit other families in that. But I don't know that we really have the ability to transport under these guidelines more students than we're legally required to for the coming year. I don't recommend this lightly. I know this is a hardship on families, but operationally, this is one of these things that is really kind of it's a plan killer, and it almost could dictate which way you go planning-wise. Because if we have in-person schooling in any shape or fashion, we are legally obligated to provide transportation to the kindergarten through 6th grade students who live more than 2 miles from school.
Would it make a difference if we went hybrid versus everyone in?
Yep.
For the, the number of students who would be riding?
I don't know until we actually were to run the runs. Again, if you did, depending on the hybrid model, let's say week on, 2 days, 2 days per week or whatnot, until we actually had the students assigned to whichever model they were in, and we could configure the bus routes to figure out if we have enough space or not. Again, we may not even have enough space even transporting the students we're legally required to, but I'd at least have to figure out who do we have to get on a bus to see if we're going to be able to accommodate or not, or do we need to, shift buses from one school to another, add a second tier run to an elementary or middle school just to make the numbers work. I'd be open again. That'd be one of the situations where if we get everyone we're required to transport to school and we have extra seats, I have no problem coming back and trying to revisit it or come up with a way to transport more students. But I don't know before we actually got the numbers in and had everyone scheduled to know if we have enough seats or not.
I think this has a hugely adverse impact, especially on a population that DESI wants us to make sure comes life to the school building, which is the EL students. One of the greatest problems with connection to the EL families is definitely transportation. Many of them don't have it. They may fall outside of the statutory requirement. I'm sure there are other people that, you know, they don't have to be just EL folks. So one of the things that I think would be really important would actually be, for me, to make this decision, would be to know what model we're adopting, because it's very, very possible that, as Jeff said, if it's a hybrid model, that 1/3 of the students would actually be able to be accommodated, the full 1/3. So I think that that would be really important. I also want to tell you that I have received several comments about transportation. And so a summary of them is this. Is it possible to extend the deadline for bus registration until we know what plan the schools will adopt for the fall? Families who may prefer to drive their children must consider if they're available to drop off and pick up, depending on the school schedule. Families with a parent out of work have trouble justifying a bus cost if their child's at home or in school only part-time. Asking parents to pay for a bus that they may or may not prefer to ride without giving them the school day information doesn't seem fair. So those are the kinds of things that I've been receiving as comments in terms of transportation. I think, again, it goes to that whole thing about, you know, we need to know what the plan is. If our system had any way of actually determining who needs transportation under any circumstances and so on without paying a fee to register, it would just, you know, give us all the information we need, but the system doesn't allow it, so we're stuck with what we've got.
We're a little stuck with what we've got, but I think the other takeaway is that just based on thank you, Linda, just based on the pure numbers, we're not gonna have the capacity to be able to transport any of the students who would typically pay the fee to ride the bus. Because if you're paying the fee to ride the bus, you live below 2 miles, and we're not legally obligated to provide transportation to you, it's an extra. Or you're in grades 7 to 12, and again, we're not legally obligated to provide transportation. So, I just don't, if our buses are gonna operate at a third capacity, I don't foresee a situation where we're gonna be able to majorly open up that ridership to students beyond what we're legally obligated to provide. And what we probably have to do is take care of everyone who we legally have to provide transportation to first, see how filled our buses are, see if we have any excess capacity. If we do at that point in time, I'm open to trying to fill the buses. I don't want to have a bus ride on full. I would at least want to get to the 33% capacity that we can. But I'm not hopeful, to be quite honest with you, and I don't want to set up like false hope for parents that, you know, we would be able to take on many of these riders. So that almost negates their concern about whether or not they should pay or not. We wouldn't be providing transportation to any of those families,
Okay.
in my opinion.
But let's say that we don't provide transportation and then the family decides, well, then we're gonna have to go remote because otherwise we can't attend.
Right.
That puts a family, you know, especially people who have the higher needs, who need that transportation, places them in a pretty tough situation.
I agree. Yeah, this isn't something, again, I'm not taking this lightly. I don't like this recommendation. Given this guidance from DESI, though, I don't see how and again, there's no way we're gonna get 90 school buses, you know, to be able to transport our students. And I'm not even worried about the money. Physically, there aren't that many buses around that we could just pick up. But it's just not doable to run our buses at a third of capacity.
But I think that, oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask Joanne, do you have, know from past, like what percentage of our students are we transporting that we have to transport legally?
Yes, the superintendent asked me to gather that, and, so last year, well, we had 1,031 students, grades K to 6 over 2 miles that we transported.
over 2 miles.
K to 6, over 2 miles.
It's more like 40%, right?
So, we transported 3,400, so it's
Okay,
right
so
at
about a
about
third,
a third, like the superintendent said. So also, right now, the number registered, you know, it changes year to year, but only 602 families who are grades K to 6 over 2 miles have registered. But registration, and the superintendent has that in the last paragraphs of his report, bus registration is less at this point this year than it was the same time period last year.
You mind if I can, I had just asked Peter this afternoon, just
Oh,
for a
okay.
couple of other numbers, because like one of the things that we typically make our bus routes, or figure out how many buses we need by our elementary population, and then that's enough buses to suffice our middle school and our high school runs in the morning. But I asked him to just kind of break down at the elementary, the middle, and the high school level for me, how many students were over 2 miles at the elementary, middle, and high school. And the bigger number, I was a little surprised, but then I shouldn't be, was actually at the middle school. So last year, we had 933 students that were over 2 miles from school. So the middle schools, again, because we only have 2 and not 4, they're drawing from a larger general area, and I don't know why I didn't think of that. But if you take the 933 and divide it by, the 29 school buses, because that's what we have in our fleet, it comes out to around 31, 32 students. So if we're already over capacity technically if everyone wanted to ride, that was over the 2 miles. I think the only saving grace could be that not everyone who is eligible actually wants to ride the school bus, and that's why Joanna is seeing less enrollments. But we would technically need to get that, 32, 33, down to the 22, 23, 24 to be able to hit the number. If we were able to do that, like I said, I don't mind opening up transportation to other groups of students, but I think we have to take care of the ones that we're legally required to provide the transportation to first, before we would then take on any other students.
What would you do with the buses that do the high school run?
We just wouldn't do a high school run in the morning. So, I mean, what that would help for is like cleanliness. We would have one less run to worry about disinfecting between routes, because there's a whole disinfection protocol you have to go through. We could actually get the buses out to the middle schools earlier, because we may need to get the middle schools into school a little bit earlier to be able to free up the buses to then do something at the elementary schools. So it would just buy us time. So instead of running 3 runs in the morning, we would only have to worry about doing 2 operational runs at the middle schools and the high school. Now, worst case scenario, if we ever couldn't get even just all the kids we were required to provide at the middle school level on, that's the bigger concern for me. We could figure out which runs could be done quickly, get a bus to do those runs, get those kids in, send a couple buses back for the kids that couldn't make the run, do a quick disinfectant to get the kids on the runs, and then get them to school. But it's going to be an operational issue.
I don't even know where to begin. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just utterly ridiculous. And from an MASC perspective, I just feel like at some point, we have to reach out to them and say, these guidelines from DESE, how can they be supported? It's so utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, but here's the thing, what's the alternative?
Well, okay.
Stuffing 50 kids on a bus.
Well, absolutely,
Right.
but, I understand that, but, I mean, I don't know. Anyways, with regards to the siblings riding, it could be more than one sibling.
Good.
Okay? And then that negates your spacing, right? Because as soon as you put two kids in a seat, then you've now got 2, not the siblings, but now closer to another student, right? If I'm looking at this correctly?
But they say you can still maintain your 3 feet distance.
Because they're in the
Okay.
same household, so.
But not to the student in
See,
front of
further
them.
across the aisle
Or
from
across
them.
the aisle.
Oh,
You might have to
right.
move to the middle of the seat.
There's no one across the aisle, they're behind you.
All right, in the seat in front, all right. And
Now-
I don't think we can recommend carpooling. How can we do that? If we're telling people, look, you gotta, avoid, being around people who could possibly have been infected, how can we tell people to, set up carpooling mechanisms to get kids to school?
Same
Yeah,
problem.
I hear what you're saying, but it's no different than riding on a school bus with 25 other kids either. If you have your mask on, I mean, and for all practical purposes, when it comes to that, I mean, there are kids within their neighborhoods, whether we like it or not, that are playing together.
No, I understand.
We also have a lot of relatives, so you might have cousins where like one mother might drive or father might drive the kids in the morning, someone picks them up in the afternoon. I mean, that stuff happens. We could just, request and urge that they be cautious. They, obviously contain themselves within their grouping. Wear masks the same as you would on a bus. I'm just saying, based on these guidelines, I can't operate buses the same we did the previous year. We can't take care of the same ridership. And if we're basically going to be at a third capacity, if I were a parent, I would rather know about, like, that is one thing that we could tell them now as compared to waiting, the couple of weeks. Because I just do not see, unless we were able to significantly add buses to our fleet, both for practical purposes of being able to get them, and secondly, being able to pay for them, how it's even a viable option.
And John, I apologize if I sound snappy.
No, you don't. No, you're
I'm
good.
just saying, though, that,
same boat as
this
you.
is not an alternative, okay? This is like, I'm gonna give you a plan, because that's what I'm supposed to do, but it's completely not doable. That's what I feel like it
Or
is.
barely doable, right? Barely.
Depends where
Right.
you live, right? Okay, if you live in a
Yeah, and again,
tiny little town, it's great.
I think over the next several weeks, just this topic and many other topics, we're gonna have to choose from a bunch of
No, I agree with you.
bad
I agree.
options.
I agree.
I don't think we're gonna have any
It's
good
just
options.
so frustrating, to have to look at some of this ridiculousness.
Can we get a couple of more buses? Maybe, like,
Does NRT even have them?
no, I mean, the problem, to get a bus at this point in time is impossible. And I mean, one or two buses, if it were that'd be one thing. But
that's what I'm
again,
saying.
just,
Even one or two buses helps a little.
I know where
it
you can get a
won't help
small one.
until we actually know
Right.
who is gonna take us up on the buses. That's why we almost need to kind of make a decision at some point. Clear out the students who we're not going to be transporting, at least in the first pass. Lock in whoever is going to take us up on transportation that's, we're obligated to provide transportation to. Create those routes so that we can see if there's any actual extra seats available that we could then figure out what to do with. But I think until we actually do that, I don't know that there's a heck of a lot more we can do. And Don, I'm in no way defending this because as I had to read this several times to even make sense of it, but there are a lot of school districts that only provide transportation to the students that they're legally obligated to. So this isn't a problem for a lot of districts because they're only providing over 2 miles and K to 6. So they're not providing to the other groupings.
So, parents that have already registered, so let's say you have a kid that's within 2 miles, right? And they usually take the bus every year. And I know a lot of families in that
Yeah.
situation. They can get a refund if they
Yeah,
if they choose to say, look, we'll just drive that one child or whatever to school.
Yeah, I'm saying if we actually made a decision for the year, which just changed our practice.
I know it's all predicated, but
Right, but no, I would want to refund the
Right.
fees that were already paid. I'm not looking to hold on to their money, but we would basically send them a communication saying, this is what we're going to have to implement for the start of the year.
Yep.
Should things change, we get a vaccine, whatever reason, COVID kind of goes away and we have it under control, then we could reopen up and re-look at this. But for the time being, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to provide transportation to your student, and your reimbursement will be forthcoming. It'll take a little bit to get the reimbursement out, but that we would tell them ahead of time, the reimbursement's coming, just so that there's no, financial loss on top of not being able to provide a service. But they would then at least be able to start to make alternative plans, or to Maria's point, it may have them have to choose a particular learning mode if they can't accommodate, let's say it was hybrid, and they, for whatever reason, they can't get their students there, they can't get another ride, they're less than the 2 miles. Now, again, less than 2 miles, they might be more likely to get the kids to school than not, but still, they may opt for a different mode.
I mean, and here's the thing, if you open it up and say, okay, we have 7 extra seats just based on, these are the required riders, right? I mean, what if 18 people apply? Are we gonna have a lottery for those extra bus
Well, I
seats?
don't know, that's what we would have to determine.
Right. All right, so, I mean, I think we really gotta figure out.
But without even knowing like what the
Right.
numbers are, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So what do we have to do to find those out? Like, what do we have to do to find out, so do we want people to stop registering? Like, how do we operationalize this for parents right now?
I think we have to make a decision tonight if, that we're gonna change our practice to only provide transportation to those that we're legally obligated to provide, and have to run the numbers, right?
If those are the guidelines, we don't
Right.
really have a choice.
We don't have a
Right.
choice.
Right.
Right, I don't wanna do it either, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If, and again, if we make that decision tonight, at least parents have a heads up on one of a million things they need a heads up on.
No, I agree, we have to make a decision.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, we're gonna be making a bunch of
Right.
best of bad choices.
At least once we make the decision, then they can start looking at,
Yeah,
So,
oh,
I'm sorry, I have another question. Okay, so right now, we operate the number of buses that we're operating based on the fees that we receive, plus whatever we've allocated in the budget for these buses. So these fees are gonna go away. So what does that do to the budget?
less than you would think, because the fees that we receive from the buses, it's really like a nominal fee. It's not a proportional payment toward the bus itself. The $200 that families pay, or even like the prorate if there's a savings, is really a fraction of what the true cost is for riding them. So what did we bring in fees last year? Well, Joanna looks that up. The counter would be, let's say it's a couple $100,000. If we were to add, 10 buses, that's $700,000. So the fee would never offset what the
And
cost
it's
would
not
be.
about offsetting.
300,000.
Okay, so $300,000 is gonna have to come from somewhere, because we're still operating the same number of buses. But in addition to that, my greatest concern here is truly that the people who, under any model we choose, the people who most need to get to that building and who do not have access to transportation are the ones that we're supposed to get to the building, okay, under these plans. So it is really difficult for me to vote on something where we don't have the ability to provide transportation where none is available. And the people who are gonna truly be impacted are the special needs groups that I've been working on and been part of the working group for. And not that I don't care about everybody else, because just like you, this is an extremely difficult thing to do. But, could we find out somehow how many seats are available in addition to what the statute requires? And then figure out how to allocate those seats, because truly, there are gonna be people who have no other way of coming.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And like I said, I'm not happy about this. I don't recommend this lightly. The problem that we also have, though, is people who don't have to pay a fee for the bus because they live, say, more than 2 miles from the school and they're in grades K to 6. There's no incentive for them to tell us ahead of time that they want a bus pass. So like these are some of the people that are kind of the stragglers at the end when we're getting to August and we're starting to put our routes together. Because we're legally obligated to pay for them, there's no incentive for them to actually tell us in June. There's nothing stopping them from it, but a lot just don't. So they end up registering for the bus towards, the end of July or early August. We're still required to provide them transportation. I don't see us having a situation where we don't, at some point, make a decision that none of us like. Notify the parents that unfortunately it looks like we're not going to be able to provide transportation because of this. Share the data, because, and even like the graphics, I don't like them, but at least it shows how few kids you can actually get on a bus. Have there be a date and time, and it's probably not going to be until a couple weeks before we go back to school, where we lock in the students who are going to be free for transportation, again, over 2 miles, anyone who's K to 6, get them scheduled on the buses so that we actually can figure out, are we gonna be, we might find out at that point in time that we actually need 31 buses and not 29. Or if we really only needed 26, then we've got 3 buses in play. that we might be able, we're already under contract for them, so we might be able to open up additional seats. Then the school committee would have to figure out how you give out those additional seats. You know, is it a lottery? Is it, you know, I don't know what we would do to do that. But I don't see us, unfortunately, even being at that point until we can get everyone scheduled who we're legally obligated to transport, and then be able to figure out how many extra seats we may or may not have.
Okay, so if these people have no incentive to actually register, period, because we're obligated to transport them, we may never know this until the day before school starts or the day after school starts, which is a serious issue.
But that's not new. I mean, this is something we deal with
Well,
every
I
year.
understand, but this is different circumstances.
Right, the
here.
only thing that I think can help is we have, over the last couple of years, set up timelines for, we say, if you tell us by X date, well, we're gonna create the route based on who's in there. So, yes, we're gonna pick you up, but it might not be where you want us to pick you up. You may have to go longer to get to your bus stop. So those deadlines may help in some fashion, letting people know, and we could do something like that to at least say, all right, by August 15th, let's say, if you have registered, you are going to be, you know, scheduled for a bus run. If you, for a bus stop. If you register after that date, you're going to be assigned to one of the existing bus stops. We still have to provide you a seat, but it may not be ideal where you want it to be. That might encourage people to sign up on time.
Could we, in the communication, if we do change this communication, maybe add that in there, if you believe your child should be getting transportation because of you're outside of 2 miles, please register right away so we can get numbers, you know?
Yeah, I
Just-
mean,
just
we would
encourage people to
just start
help
pushing
the
that, right?
process, you know?
Right.
You know, whether they do or not, but at least maybe somebody sees it, goes, all right, I'll register.
So I do think that we need to be very clear about what it is that we want parents to do going forward, depending on how we vote. So that way we get the most accurate numbers possible.
But those are the only things that I can think of as a little bit of a incentive to get people to sign up by a date. But if this is the action the committee goes with, I can work with Joanna to kind of lay out some of those deadlines and communicate that, and then at least keep you updated with regard to how many people have registered, what's our capacity look like, are we gonna be able to meet capacity given the bus fleet, are we not, how many extra seats there are, and then be able to have that discussion about, you know, do you allow the sibling to ride? Again, you don't have to, but do you allow them to ride, or is there another special population or group that you wanna open it up to? And figure out a fair and equitable way of looking at that.
So, I'm going to still ask another question. If we go into a hybrid model where, I'm going to just use an example. Cohort A, or whatever you want to call them, Group A goes to school for 2 days. Group B goes to school for 2 days, okay? And we would need to, if we wanted to do our transportation and be able to maximize the number of seats on a bus to actually get kids to school and offer them exactly the same access throughout, because that's important actually to some people, for some people. What would we need to do? We'd need to stagger it in thirds in order to fit everybody on these buses?
No, I don't think you can let your educational program be dictated by your bus. I think we have to put together the best educational program that we can, and then see what the operational issues are gonna be on the bus. Honestly, there'd be no worth just transporting students to a subpar educational experience, just because we can get them there. So in my opinion, you've gotta put together the best education program first, and then figure out your accommodations. There certainly could be more kids accommodated in a hybrid model than in a full in-person model, because you're not transporting 100% of the kids every day in the hybrid model. But I still, until we actually had students register and we figured out which cohorts they were gonna be in and what the patterns were gonna be, I still couldn't tell you ahead of time how many more seats that may open or may not open.
So we just don't know.
I don't know until we actually, you know, number one, have the data of who we legally have to transport.
Right.
And then second, almost figure out, based on the program we select, how many kids we can accommodate in that offering.
Okay, so rather than take a vote on whether we're only gonna go with a statutory requirement this year, and last time these issues came up, I already had concerns about this because I don't think we gave full disclosure. And there have been a lot of folks asking questions about transportation, but we're at the point that we're at, okay, and we have to deal with it. First, I think it has to be made extremely clear to everybody that we have limitations this year. 2, start from scratch. Just give us the people that actually have to statutorily ride on the bus. And then, once we know what model we're going with, reach out to folks to register in addition to that. We have to offer the other transportation. We have to just identify who those people are.
If there's space available.
Right. That's what, we have to
No,
set a baseline.
We have to give whatever those people are. People, it doesn't matter, right? If there's 1,000 individuals under the statute who have to ride the bus, we have to offer the bus. We have no
Right, okay, I see what you're
no
saying.
give on that.
Saying the-
We're
I think
gonna
you're
have
saying
to
the legally
offer it.
required kids.
Okay, so that would actually be very important for us to know, because if, let's say, we decide to go with a full in-school model, and it costs us an additional $300,000, these are the kinds of things that are important to us
Right.
to know. I'm not saying that we give up on that for 300,000, but it's an important thing to know.
Right.
Let's say that we know that it's fully taken up, all the seats on the bus are taken up by these folks who under the statute have the right to sit there and get to school, okay? And we decide we're gonna go with a hybrid model, and all we need is another 2 buses. We may decide to go with it. So I don't wanna just say tonight, if I can, that this is all we're gonna do, and then we're not gonna do anything else, because it really does matter what we decide to do.
Yeah, but I don't want you to think that I, in any way, said we weren't gonna do anything else. I was just saying, at some point in time, we have to create the baseline. So whether you vote tonight or we vote next week, to whatever, we have to have the baseline, and we have to use the 29 buses we have to transport the students that we're legally obligated to transport to school. I think that has to happen first. The only way practically for that to happen is to basically notify the people who have already registered who fall outside of that requirement, to notify them that we likely will not be able to transport them, and they should start planning now for alternate transportation. Once we figure out who we're legally obligated to get on the buses, and we can figure out, again, which model, are we full in person, are we remote? Remote, we don't have to worry about it, but if we're in the hybrid scenario, how many of these kids can we actually get on buses? Are there extra seats? And now we can maybe go back to the pool of people who would paid for bus passes because they needed transportation, and say, all right, now we can, provide some transportation to you. We would just have to figure out at that point in time, like, what would be fair and equitable. We can't just pick kids to get the service and not others. So I don't know if it would be a lottery or what it would be to demonstrate need. We'd have to figure that out. But we certainly could do that.
So we
I'm
can
not
make a
saying
decision
stop.
tonight, and we could change, and then 2 weeks from now, change it, and say, okay, well, now that we know the data, we can now expand upon the number of kids that we can transport, and then we have to figure out what the criteria is. So just because we decide tonight that, all right, we're gonna change the practice to only transport who we have to transport, doesn't mean we can't revisit it, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, if the numbers are positive,
But it gives us a baseline to
Right.
work. It gives him a baseline to
Right.
work from, and
But
parents.
But the point is that I think we already know what the baseline is, because don't we know which students fall within what the numbers are?
We only know based on last year's numbers of who we actually transported. So we have a sense of if those,
No, but I mean, the numbers within the statute, the statutory requirement, we know who signed up, and we know which people, because they may not register, but they're still entitled to a seat on the bus.
oh, but we don't do that. There are a lot of people who are entitled to it that have never taken and never will take the bus. We don't want to create routes for kids that will never ride the school bus. There'd be no efficiency in doing that.
Okay, but if they come to you on the first day of school and they say, this is where I live and I want a seat on that bus, by statute, it says that you have to give it to them.
Yes, but I'm just saying that every single student who would qualify is never gonna, the annual historical data wouldn't support that everyone's just gonna come out and do that. You know, we can always adjust for a couple kids here or there, but it wouldn't be like, you know, we're gonna add an extra 500 kids to the buses just because they happen to live outside the 2-mile radius.
And you could have kids that did take the bus last year because they were, you know, they were provided legally, but the parents decided, you know, I don't want to send them on the bus.
That's correct, and
Right, but
actually
that's why
there
we need
was,
to have, register them and find out how many.
no, but we had a very high percentage of folks who said that no matter what, they would not take the bus.
We don't know what percentage of those were the people that are, you know, were legally
Right, we
obligated.
just don't have
That's
the
why we need to get the
knowledge.
numbers.
No, but that's why we have to kind of get the data and the numbers, because that is also going to be affected by ultimately a week or two when we make the
Okay.
decision on the model.
I still, explain, really truly, because if statutorily, by law, we are required to bus 1,000 of our students, we have to leave 1,000 seats open. What is it that says that just because they did not register within the time that you requested that they register, that you are not obligated by law to still offer them that seat? I don't get that.
No, we still are obligated to transport them if they came forward and wanted transportation. I'm just saying historically, it's never happened that everyone has wanted transportation that's qualified. And what we do is we look at the actual numbers of students each year that say are over those 2 miles who would qualify. That gives us a good just prediction about how many kids are actually gonna wanna be transported.
Right. And it
Over
might
the
go
2
up or down a
miles.
little. Just
Up and down, right, but it's not gonna be like wholesale, or all of a sudden now everyone is gonna want to. If anything, this is the year where some kids who may qualify, parents may not feel comfortable, and that could actually work to our advantage. If they didn't take us up on transportation, we may be able to open those seats if they're there to other students.
But we will only know that after day one.
Well, yeah, technically, but I mean, that can even change as the school year goes on, but I think we'll have a very good indication, because what we'll do is we'll pick
The
some.
DESI guidelines could change in 3 months. Yeah. We don't know what's gonna happen. They might say this could, you know, if it blows up, I mean, if we make a selection and decide to go fully open and COVID blows up in Massachusetts, they might be like, nobody on a bus, everybody's remote.
Right.
All of this is fluid. I think what we're just trying to do here is establish something so parents know what our plan is right now. And if it changes in 2 weeks, it changes in 2 weeks. It's just, this is a sea of bad choices and we have to make them. So we'll go to the statutory minimum. We'll just, or not, depending on how the vote goes. This is what we signed up for, right? The hard choices.
Donnie, do you want to make the motion, or you ready to make a motion, or you want?
What do we
Yeah, I'm
wanna
ready
get?
to make a motion. I think, shame on Desi is all I can say. Just shame on them.
I mean, they gotta make a bunch of bad choices too. It's no good choices for anybody.
I would just absolutely hate to see if we offer a hybrid model and a, fully distance learning type of model, because you have to anyway, you have to offer that. So we offer hybrid in that, and a family chooses that they're gonna do total remote, and they're within one of those special groups, and they choose that because they cannot get the transportation to school. That
Oh, yeah, in the hybrid situation, you're only gonna have half the kids there.
Right, it's gonna be 50-50.
50-50.
No, I understand.
Oh, so you're not gonna even be transporting the typical number of kids, correct? It would be.
Not every day.
Not every day, right, half the number of kids that we would typically
Like if you did a
transport.
week on and a week
Right,
off,
but
right?
this is
Like
what
red
I-
week
this
and
is, this is what I'm
Yeah.
saying, Donna, is, and to everybody, if we knew the model, and we knew, we're in a very different situation in terms of this, of a decision like this, but I understand you need to get your base, but your base still, to me, makes, because you have to have those number of seats available, so it really makes no difference, because until the end, until day one.
But I'm just saying, again, based on like the historicals, this is typically what happens. But to your point, let's even just say, we get to the first day of school, we decide we're gonna do a hybrid scenario. We're locked in and we think we've got some spaces, or we don't have spaces, whatnot. If I were a parent, I would still rather have the district reach out to me after a week of school and say, hey, the numbers shook out this way, that now we actually can transport your child to school. Would you like to avail yourself to transportation? I'd still rather have that and have transportation start a week late and go for the year than nothing at all. And what I'm trying to express to you is we need to take care of everyone we legally have to, but I want to still work to make sure that our buses are operating at full capacity. I'm not just shutting it down after we have everyone we've been required to take care of. I just want to be able to thoughtfully get that in place to then be able to figure out where we're at capacity-wise, and then figure out how we, again, if we have capacity, how we best serve the rest of the students to
Right.
try to get them somewhere. And again, if it's a hybrid model, you might, ballpark, maybe you're gonna be able to service 2 times as many kids as you would in the full in-person model, but we won't know until we actually get there. But I'm not giving up I'm not gonna have open seats on the bus.
Right.
After this, I just need a little bit of time to figure out who we actually have to get on the bus, what play we may have, and then how we actually go about filling the rest of those seats.
Okay, but so we are fully understanding of this. We would not be able to extend beyond the statutory requirement until, let's say, September, very likely, unless we go hybrid model and we have twice the capacity for transportation.
Then we'll
And then
adjust.
in that case, then we would open it up and we have to decide based on what we're gonna open it up. So, but that's the clear understanding of it, and it has to be very well explained to folks, because right now, they have no option. Many people have no option. 2/3
No, I
of
understand.
the students have no option.
We can only make a decision with the information we have. And
That's
I'd rather plan
correct.
for the worst case, and the worst case is 33%, so.
Right.
I mean, that's the information we have, and we're not gonna choose anything for 2 weeks, and then we can just come back to it if we need to. It's not a good option, you're right, but it's the option that's on the table, and it's the only option we have, and we really have no choice but to say yes, because that's the guidelines.
The guidelines prevent us from, as we make choices as how we're gonna open school, these guidelines don't allow us to do that. Like we decide remote or hybrid or whatever, we can, but these guidelines, just on the sheer numbers, they're tying our hands.
So let's work from the worst case,
Yeah.
and if it opens up, or we go hybrid and things open up, we'll figure that out. We're just the next year is gonna be us figuring things out, and the admin figuring things out in real time. I mean, that's really the situation we're in for the next,
I think-
God knows how long, 2 years maybe.
Yeah.
I think for the special groups, though, if there is funding available at the state level to make transportation available, because that definitely is the group that, and it became very clear to me working within this working group, I can see why, the physical need would be there. That if funding is available and there is nothing else we can do but reach out for that funding to increase the bus capacity, I think we should make every effort to do it.
Well, Ann, if you're counting special ed as one of your special groups, some of the students
Absolutely.
already have specialized transportation as
I
part of their
understand.
IEP.
Right.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have to do that no matter what.
I know.
Yep.
Okay.
But there's 230-something students who don't fall within that, who I don't know where they live and whether they fall within the statute or not. And those students, we could see it all across that whenever they need something, one of the, even getting to school, one of the problems is always transportation. So this is what, I'm pointing it out so that we all keep that in mind.
I think I mean, your points are valid. I just think in the situation we're in right now, there's just not a lot, there's not a lot of wiggle room. There's no wiggle room. This is where we're at. In the next 12 months, this is what we're gonna be dealing with. So we're gonna just have to make choices sometimes that we don't love and figure it out as we go along, which is not the ideal way to run a school district, but
Would circuit breaker money allow us to provide in-district transportation to special needs kids who could not otherwise get to school?
Yes, circuit breaker would provide that, but we're obligated to provide transportation to special ed students
But not all
regardless.
special ed students.
if they have transportation in their
Yes.
IEP.
Yes, but if we had to increase that number because they couldn't get to school.
Again, I think it's a vehicle issue.
Okay.
I mean, we scramble now if we have to add a sped vehicle, or if you have a homeless student and, you're trying to transport those. I think it's just gonna be a physical,
I know where we can find one small bus.
According to this, it's like 5 kids.
That one you can't, yeah. I would gladly do a bus route in the morning if that would help, but, yeah,
Yeah.
we can't do fixed transportation on that bus.
All right, so can we take a motion on this? And then if we want to further discuss, we can after the motion, but,
Okay, I'm gonna give this my best shot, so. I recommend the school committee, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 68, provide transportation only to students in kindergarten through grade 6 who reside 2 or more miles from their assigned school for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
okay. Any further questions? Anybody have any problem with that motion? I thought it was a very good motion, but.
That was good, yeah. I like that
Right.
one.
Are we able to add anything to that motion that would say that this decision will be reviewed once we know what model we're following?
I think that's in our purview anyways.
Yeah, that's something we can
Yeah,
ask
we
at
can,
any time.
yeah, just like we're changing it right now, it's a practice.
Okay.
So we can have this discussion 3 weeks from now and,
Yeah.
and make a different motion to change our practice to allow for however many more students,
Yeah, we can schedule on a future,
I think, in
Yeah,
the
we'll
end,
amend we'll amend this
Right,
motion.
Right,
Yeah.
if,
and I think the intent is, I think everyone in this room wants to provide as much transportation as we
yeah.
can. It's just a matter of figuring out what capacity we have and how to do it best.
Okay.
so we have a motion, a second, any other questions or comments? Okay, do we have to roll call this one, or we can do it?
I think it technically could go either way, because it's not a policy, it's more of a procedure, but if you want to do a roll call,
We'll do a roll
might be
call.
cleaner.
Donna,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
John,
aye.
Maria,
Aye,
aye.
Yeah, I
Was
feel
there-
you.
without choice.
Maria, I feel you. I feel
No,
you.
none of us
We
have
all
a choice.
agree.
I know, we all have no choice.
Do we need to do any sort of motion in terms of the refund of the bus fee?
Um,
I hate this.
I thought we had talked about that at a previous
Right, but I
meeting.
don't know if we needed to, because it's a money thing, I didn't know if we needed to make any formal motions or.
Has it actually been transacted?
So, right now, the policy states no refunds. So we're changing that.
that's actually in the policy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and,
Go ahead.
no, we'll implement as soon as we can.
Right.
you know.
I think, to be honest with you, I will spend some time over the next day or two kind of crafting a message to the parents specific to this. But I think there will be questions about the refund if they've already paid. So I don't want to have there be any ambiguity to that. So I haven't seen the policy, but I trust you. So why don't we have the school committee make a motion to reimburse anyone who's already paid the fee? And we should shut off registration.
I'm gonna call MCC.
Okay,
First thing in the morning.
just to stop taking.
Yep.
And we could update our website to just reflect what we're doing for the time being. But I think it would make sense to do that, to reimburse people for the time being, so there's not that financial angst of what's going on. And then as we know what's gonna happen, because there could even be questions that come up about, all right, if we're in hybrid and I'm only using the bus half the time, what do I have to pay? So, again, we might all have differing opinions on that, but we almost should address that at a later date. And then we could figure out a different protocol for a follow-up registration based on available seats once the committee votes. So I would say, let's take a motion to, particularly if it's a policy that you're gonna be not
Okay.
changing, but for this special event.
I recommend the school committee fully refund families who have registered for transportation for the school year 2020, 2021, whatever it was. Sorry, I just lost it.
Yeah, I think
It's
I think it was fine.
Second. I'll go with that. We get it.
Yeah, thanks, I'm sorry. I think I'm getting too much CO, no, just kidding.
Any other questions or comments on that part?
No, and the sooner the better, I think, there's a lot of families who are
Right.
struggling financially, so let's just get it back to them.
All right, so Donna,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Maria,
Yes.
aye, 5-0. Okay, so,
Okay, so we'll get working on that. I will forward you the communication that I send to the families too, just so that you're all aware of it. And we can all try to help answer questions as we go. I'll try to be explicit about the intent of all of us in that, about once we get this baseline data, being able to make some decisions going forward. All right, my last update of the evening actually is more cheerful than the previous ones. The Chelmsford High School graduation has been cleared to take place on Saturday, August 8th. So Principal Murray had detailed a little itinerary of the event. Sue Rosa from the Board of Health had reviewed it and signed off on it, and the police chief and fire chief have as well. So a week from Saturday, we will be having the Chelmsford High School graduation on Simonian Field at Chelmsford High School.
Today with the facilities group, we went over with
Okay.
Dean McIsaac. They've done a wonderful job setting it up. And it was, Ryan Hooley was there, Sue Rosa,
Yeah.
Brian Curley. It was a good group, and everyone's working together. And they really, through the rehearsal, all the way through, they have stations, for cleaning of the hands and all. And I just hope that everyone who goes and is involved understands this is really special that we're able to do it. It's really special, and a lot of people put in a lot of time on all kinds of parts of the town, so that if you're requested to do whatever it happens to be, that people do understand that this is, having been involved in over 30 of them, this is an extraordinary circumstance, and it will work as long as everyone cooperates. And John McIsaac, obviously an Emerson House kid, which explains why he did such a great job, but they've done a wonderful job of setting it all up. I was very impressed today.
Good, thank you. Yeah, there has been a tremendous amount of time and effort that have gone into it.
A big outdoor tent type thing?
No?
I'm hoping for a lot of shade and about 65-degree weather. So we'll
We'll even
see.
have something like a roof and open doors?
Nothing.
Wait till you put
So,
that, Kylie, on
What's the
day.
status of the paving and stuff there? Is that gonna be finalized before?
At
The
the high school?
entrances and the exits, yeah.
Oh, it'll be ready for the start of the school year, but it won't be ready for Saturday. I can get you an update when I get back from,
No, but, so everybody's gonna be entering from and exiting from the same location?
yeah, from the rear of the building. And that's where all the parking for the event is too. It's down near the turf field. People will be parking in that area.
The parents going to be asked to drop the students off by the upper field.
Yep.
And then to park, so that and they said there's enough spaces because they're two family members.
Between the back of the pack, the front of the sports kind of complex, the front of the pack, the side lot, and even up in front of Harrington, there's enough parking for the families. Attendance is limited to the graduate and two family members, so we are, anticipating a set number of cars. We don't anticipate people coming in multiple cars, but they put a lot of time into this, and again, I think it is going to be a special ceremony for the seniors. I'm glad they were able to do it. And I'm just hoping the weather cooperates with us.
And I
So,
think we have
we're
to-
on for
I think
Saturday
we
the
also
8th.
have to encourage people that if they are sick, please don't. It would just be too much, so.
Right.
Any questions on graduation? Okay, all right, I think that was the last new item, right?
Yeah, we'll just adjourn at the end for executive
Yeah,
session.
so like last week, we'll do the executive session after we do liaison reports and all that stuff, so we'll just move that. So, are there any liaison reports?
This is not liaison, but I do want to let everybody know, and I had said it privately at the beginning of the meeting. I saw Mr. Thomas today, and I just want to send out a thank you really to all the work that they do in terms of allowing students to take leadership type of programs and so on. And despite COVID, there he was handing out the plaques to the students and just making us all pretty much aware of the type of commitment that so many organizations like this particular organization have to our students and to our schools. And I just really wanted to thank them for doing that.
Okay, anybody else? No? No, we're all involved with the various committees. I do want to say that parent input session, even though it was long, it was three
Very
one-hour
fun.
sessions, but there were 30 plus parents in each one. It was amazing and a lot of good questions.
Yeah, I was
mean,
surprised even at the last one, because the last one at the beginning didn't seem like many people were hooking on, but then, like you said, right at the end, I'm like, oh, wow, there's 30 people
Yeah.
on here. So at least we were able to offer that, and I did take opened up one of the pages to populate with that, plus all these guidance documents, plus, anything we can, and we'll put it as the forefront on the website, just so it's in one place, at least even for me too. Sometimes I'm like, where's that document, so parents can at least peruse some of the things we're talking about tonight. Yeah, thank you for sitting in with me, that was a marathon day for us.
All right, any new items people want to bring up? All right, I just wanted to give some feedback. I know last meeting we agreed to send a letter to our local reps, letting them know we're a little disappointed. We didn't hear back from them in response to the different resolutions, so I did hear back from several of them, either by phone or email or bumping into them. And one of the issues that several of them mentioned is they were having a hard time getting their office mail at the State House. That may have been why they didn't get back to us. They also wanted me to know that they are still working behind the scenes to make sure that Chelmsford gets whatever assistance is out there. So Representative Gouveia actually offered to come to one of our meetings in September, so tentatively have her on the docket for September 15th. So that was nice of her to come in and just want to talk to us sort of one-on-one. So she'll be here on the 15th. All right, any other new items? Okay, public comment. A couple things. I did have a few emails that came in just as the meeting was started. I want to apologize that we did get an email about our mics were on for the go-to meeting before the official school committee meeting. So, I do apologize if we might have mentioned names in terms of emails that we had gotten. So, this is new for us in terms of the go-to meeting part of it. So,
I
in the
replied
future.
to this email directly
Yep.
to the individual, because I think the negative part of it was misunderstood, so.
Right.
And she replied back very kindly.
Yeah, but our apologies in terms of that.
Are we gonna read her email in though?
I was going to
Okay.
read the two
All right,
other ones.
good.
So I had one email, and again, these came in like right around the time our meeting was starting, just a little before. Tara Purrington, and this we did discuss a little bit. Wanted to know the criteria in case somebody did come down with the virus, and what kind of protocols there are. And as I said, there are some protocols that Desi sent out there. And then Erica Rial wanted to know about teachers. If they go with the hybrid model, would students of teachers be able to attend all 5 days to support their return to work? Was one of the questions she had. So those are the two that I had. I don't know if anybody else got anything else.
She also said, additionally, community ed in Chelmsford, will it be available to support childcare needs? And then will there be before or after school care? And to work, I think this means school districts to work with cohorts to support remote learning. I'm not sure. I think maybe pushing into schools to work with cohorts to support remote learning. So,
And I think that'll be answered somewhat at
Yes.
the next meeting in terms of community ed and those type of programs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're going to start to address these over the next two meetings. For those watching, if you had sent me an email over the last day or two, I've actually been away, so I've been trying to kind of catch up to them remotely as I can and read them before tonight. We did have a couple of questions, and I think this may have been one based on recollection. Teachers who teach in other school districts, but who reside in Chelmsford and have their students attend the Chelmsford Public Schools, had asked if their district adopts, I believe it was if their district adopted a hybrid model, let's say it wasn't in line with our hybrid model, if we happened to adopt one, or if they had one and we didn't, we had, say, full in-person, could their students basically come full-time even though, no, I guess the full in-person would be already answered. So it'd be in the hybrid type question, could they come all times? There was some discussion that was happening at the state level about that. I, honest to God, don't remember if a decision had been made or not, but as soon as we have any kind of guidance, we'd certainly let people know. But if I'm remembering correctly, we did get a couple of those teacher inquiries. This may have been one of them. But as soon as I am back from vacation, I'll respond to all of them.
And just one more, I didn't want to be remiss, Hannah Barker wanted us to just keep in mind the social emotional health of the teachers as well as the students, so I think that's a good point, you know? Because the teachers are under a lot of stress still,
Yes,
as
they are.
Donna will attest.
Yes, I am.
Right now, it's high.
Okay, any other public comment? Okay, so I'll take a motion to adjourn to executive session and not return.
I recommend that the school committee adjourn to executive session to discuss strategies with respect to collective bargaining or litigation,
Second.
Not return.
and to not return.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second.
Aye.
All right, Maria?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Donna? Me? Aye. Aye. All right, take a 5-minute break.
Yep, and for those who joined us on the go to meeting, I am going to shut down the meeting at this point, but appreciate you coming on board. I thought actually that worked out fairly well at the beginning of the meeting, so we'll work to continue to perfect that. So thank you for joining us.